I'm Sarah Mitchell, 28, and I thought I was finally ready to share the happiest news of my life. After years of struggling to find my place in our tight-knit Tennessee family, I believed my first pregnancy would be the moment that brought us all together. I'd imagined my father's proud smile, my mother's tears of joy, maybe even my perfect sister Rachel showing genuine excitement for once. Instead, Dad's fork clattered against his plate, and those 6 words shattered everything I thought I knew about unconditional love. That baby isn't welcome here. The silence that followed felt like a physical weight pressing down on our Sunday dinner table, the same table where we'd shared countless meals, celebrations, and what I thought were unbreakable family bonds. But what I discovered in the weeks that followed would reveal the real reason behind his rejection and change not just my future, but the entire foundation our family was built on. If you've ever felt the sting of unexpected betrayal from those who should love you most, you'll understand why this story had to be told. Growing up in Crossville, Tennessee, the Mitchell family was what everyone called blessed. We lived in a white colonial house on Maple Street, the one with the perfectly manicured lawn and the Christmas lights that made the whole neighborhood jealous every December. Dad owned Mitchell Construction, a business that had been in our family for 3 generations. And Mom was the kind of Southern woman who never left the house without lipstick and could organize a church potluck with her. Eyes closed dot, our family Christmas photos lined the mantel like a testament to our success. There was Rachel at 5, already reading chapter books and winning spelling bees, her blonde hair in perfect ringlets. There was me at 3, gap-toothed and grinning, usually slightly out of focus because I couldn't sit still long enough for the camera. By the time I was 10, the pattern was clear. Rachel was the star, and I was the supporting character in our family's carefully constructed story. Rachel excelled at everything she touched. Valedictorian, homecoming queen, full scholarship to Vanderbilt, then acceptance to medical school. She was the daughter who made our parents beam with pride at church gatherings, the one who validated all their sacrifices and hard work. Achievements were displayed like trophies throughout our house certificates, awards, newspaper clippings announcing her latest accomplishment. I was the daughter who tried. I made decent grades, played on the softball team, worked part-time at the local diner through high school. I wasn't a disappointment exactly, but I wasn't a success story either. I was just Sarah, the one who got by, who was pleasant and reliable but never exceptional. Mom would pat my shoulder and say, "Not everyone can be a doctor, honey. You'll find your path." The town of Crossville loved our family. Dad was respected as a successful businessman and church deacon. Mom was beloved for her volunteer work and famous pecan pie. Rachel was the golden child who put our small town on the map with her achievements. And me, I was the nice Mitchell girl who always had a smile and never caused trouble. That's why. Sunday dinners were so important to our family image. Every week, we'd gather around the mahogany dining table that Mom had inherited from her grandmother, the one with the slight water stain from where I'd spilled grape juice when I was 8. We'd hold hands for grace, share stories about our week, and maintain the illusion that we were the perfect American family. The dining room itself was a shrine to our family's success. The walls were covered with photos spanning 4 generations of Mitchells, all looking prosperous and happy. The china cabinet displayed Mom's wedding china, the good silver, and various awards and commemorative pieces that marked our family's milestones. The chandelier cast a warm glow over everything, making our Sunday meals feel sacred and important. For years, I believed in that perfection. I thought our family's love was unconditional, that our bonds were unbreakable, that nothing could shatter. The foundation of trust and support we built together. I trusted that when I finally had something truly wonderful to share, my family would celebrate with me. I was wrong. I met David Sullivan on a Tuesday morning at the hardware store, of all places. I was 24, still living at home and working as a receptionist at the local insurance office, trying to figure out what came next in my life. I'd gone to pick up paint samples for Mom's latest redecorating project when I literally ran into him. Well, he ran into me with a cart full of lumber. "Ma'am, I am so sorry," he said, his genuine concern immediately putting me at ease. He was tall and solid, with calloused hands, and the kind of tan that came from honest work outdoors. His brown eyes were kind, and when he smiled, I felt something I'd never experienced before, the sensation of being truly seen. David was different from the boys I'd dated in high school, or the few college guys I'd met at Rachel's Vanderbilt parties. He was 26, owned his own small construction company, and had this quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who he was and what he wanted from life. He didn't try to impress me with big words or expensive dates. Instead, he listened when I talked, remembered details about my day, and made me laugh with his dry sense of humor. Our first real date was at Murphy's Diner, where I'd worked during high school. David ordered the meatloaf and asked me about my dreams, something no one had done in years. I found myself telling him about my secret wish to become a teacher, how I always loved working with kids, but had never felt smart enough to pursue it seriously. He didn't laugh or dismiss my dreams the way my family sometimes did. Instead, he asked practical questions about teaching programs and encouraged me to look into it. "You light up when you talk about kids," he said, cutting into his meatloaf. "That's not something you can fake." Over the next few months, David became my safe harbor. He was steady and dependable in a way that made me feel secure. He didn't care that I wasn't the star of my family or that I'd never won any awards. He loved me for who I was, not for who I might become or what I could achieve. When I brought David home to meet my parents, the reception was polite but cool. Dad sized him up with the critical eye of a successful businessman evaluating a potential threat. David's small construction company, his modest pickup truck, and his working-class background didn't impress Dad the way Rachel's pre-med boyfriend had. Mom was cordial but distant, making polite conversation while clearly categorizing David as not quite her type. Rachel was the worst. She barely acknowledged David's presence, answering his friendly questions with one-word responses and checking her phone constantly during dinner. When he tried to engage her in conversation about her medical studies, she gave him a condescending smile and said, "It's pretty complicated stuff. I wouldn't expect you to understand." The contrast between David's family and mine was stark. His parents, Jim and Carol Sullivan, welcomed me with open arms from the very first meeting. They lived in a modest ranch house filled with laughter and warmth, where dinner conversations were about family news and shared jokes rather than achievements and appearances. Jim was a retired electrician who still helped David with big projects, and Carol was a retired teacher who immediately bonded with me over our shared love of children and education. "You're good for our David," Carol told me one evening as we cleaned dishes together. "He's different with you, happier, more himself." David's family didn't care about my family's reputation or my lack of impressive accomplishments. They cared about my kindness, my sense of humor, and the way I made their son smile. With them, I felt like I could be completely myself without apology. David proposed on a crisp October evening at the lake where we'd had our first picnic. He built a small wooden box himself, carving our initials into the lid. The ring wasn't expensive, but it was chosen with love, a simple solitaire that caught the light from the setting sun. "Sarah," he said, dropping to one knee on the wooden dock, "you make me want to be the best version of myself. Will you marry me?" Our wedding was a small affair held in the church where I'd grown up. My family attended, of course, but their enthusiasm felt forced. Dad walked me down the aisle with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and Mom cried tears that seemed more sad than happy. Rachel was my maid of honor, but she spent most of the reception talking to her medical school friends who'd driven down for the event. The Sullivans, on the other hand, treated our wedding like the celebration of the century. They danced, laughed, and made toasts that brought tears to my eyes. Watching David's elderly grandmother dance with his teenage cousin, seeing the joy on his parents' faces, I realized what unconditional love actually looked like. David's wedding ring became my talisman, a tangible reminder that I was worthy of love and devotion. When my family made me feel small or inadequate, I'd twist the ring around my finger and remember that David had chosen me, flaws and all, and promised to love me forever. As we settled into married life, I held on to the hope that a grandchild would be the bridge that finally brought our families together. Surely, I thought, a baby would soften my parents' hearts and help them see David the way I did. Surely, becoming grandparents would remind them that love was more important than social status or financial success. I couldn't have been more wrong. The morning I saw those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, my world shifted on its axis. I was sitting on the bathroom floor of our small rental house, David's work boots still muddy by the front door from yesterday's job site, and I felt a joy so pure and overwhelming that I started crying. We'd been trying for a baby for 6 months, though trying made it sound more clinical than it was. Really, we just stopped being careful and started dreaming. David would catch me looking at baby clothes when we went shopping, and he'd wrap his arms around me from behind, whispering about nursery colors and playground adventures. Sarah? David's voice came from the bedroom, groggy with sleep. You okay in there? I walked out holding the test, my hands shaking with excitement and disbelief. David took one look at my face and the little plastic stick, and he swept me up in his arms, spinning me around our tiny living room while I laughed and cried at the same time. We're going to be parents, he whispered into my hair, and I felt the wetness of his tears against my cheek. The next few weeks were a blur of doctor's appointments, prenatal vitamins, and quiet planning. We agreed to wait until after the first trimester to tell our families, but the secret felt like a golden bubble of happiness that surrounded us wherever we went. David would catch my eye across the room and smile, and I'd touch my still flat stomach, marveling at the tiny life growing inside me. We spent evenings curled up on our secondhand couch, making lists of baby names and debating whether to find out the sex or wait for a surprise. David was already talking about building a crib, sketching designs on napkins and measuring the spare room that would become our nursery. I want to make everything, he told me one night, his hand resting on my belly. The crib, the changing table, a little rocking chair for you to nurse in. This baby's going to know they were wanted from the very beginning. As the weeks passed and my pregnancy became more real, I found myself thinking constantly about how to tell my family. I wanted it to be perfect, a moment that would bring us all together and start healing some of the distance that had grown between us since my marriage. I imagined Mom's face lighting up with grandmother joy, Dad's graphic exterior melting as he processed becoming a grandfather. Rachel may be showing genuine excitement for once. I pictured family gatherings where my child would be loved and spoiled, where the next generation would bridge whatever gaps existed between us. I planned the announcement carefully. Sunday dinner seemed like the perfect setting, our family's most sacred tradition, the weekly ritual that had always been about connection and sharing important news. I would wait until after grace when we were all relaxed and happy, and then David and I would share our wonderful secret. I even bought a special outfit for the occasion, a flowing top that could hint at my changing body without being obvious, paired with the pearl earrings Mom had given me for my wedding. I wanted to look like the glowing mother-to-be, worthy of their excitement and support. David was nervous about the announcement. He'd never felt completely comfortable with my family, and he worried about their reaction. What if they're not happy? He asked the morning of the dinner. They'll be thrilled, I assured him, though I felt butterflies in my stomach. A grandchild changes everything. They'll see this as a new beginning for our family. The week leading up to the announcement, I found myself daydreaming about the future. I imagined Mom teaching my child to bake her famous pecan pie, Dad taking them fishing at the lake, Rachel maybe being the fun aunt who spoiled them with educational toys and museum trips. I saw Christmas mornings with presents piled under the tree, birthday parties in the backyard, and all the ways a grandchild would weave our families together. I thought about the legacy I wanted to create for my child, not just the material things, but the sense of belonging to something bigger than themselves. I wanted them to grow up knowing they were part of a family with deep roots and strong traditions. Even if those traditions needed some updating. The night before the dinner, I couldn't sleep. I kept touching my belly, whispering to the tiny baby growing inside me. "Tomorrow you'll meet your grandparents," I said softly. "They don't know about you yet, but they're going to love you so much." David held me close, his hand covering mine on my stomach. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we're a family," he whispered. "The three of us, that's what matters most." I fell asleep that night filled with hope and anticipation, certain that our announcement would be the beginning of something beautiful. I had no idea that it would instead be the moment when everything I believed about my family would crumble, leaving me to rebuild my understanding of love, loyalty, and what it really means to be welcome in your own home. The pregnancy test still sat in my jewelry box, tucked between my grandmother's brooch and my wedding earrings. It had become my most treasured possession, proof of the miracle growing inside me and the love that created it. Soon I thought it would become the first artifact in my child's story, evidence of how wanted and celebrated they were from the very beginning. I was wrong about that too. The Sunday dinner that changed everything started like any other. Mom had prepared her usual feast pot roast with vegetables, homemade rolls, and her famous green bean casserole. The dining room table was set with her good china, the one with the delicate blue flowers that had belonged to her mother. Dad sat at the head of the table in his customary spot, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed some business papers he'd brought to the table despite Mom's protests. Rachel was late, as usual, rushing in with apologies about studying for her medical boards. She looked polished and professional even in her casual clothes, her blonde hair perfectly styled, despite claiming she'd been buried in textbooks all day. She barely acknowledged David and me, giving us a distracted wave before diving into conversation with Mom about her upcoming clinical rotations. "Sarah, you look tired," Mom said as she passed the rolls. "Are you getting enough sleep?" I exchanged a glance with David, who squeezed my hand under the table. This was the opening I'd been waiting. Actually, I've been tired because probably all those late nights at the diner. Rachel interrupted, not looking up from her plate. "I told you that job would wear you out eventually." "I don't work at the diner anymore," I said patiently. "I work at the insurance office, remember? And actually, the reason I've been tired is because the insurance office is just as demanding," Dad said, setting down his papers and removing his glasses. "All that computer work, dealing with difficult customers. No wonder you're exhausted." David cleared his throat. "Actually, Mr. Mitchell, Sarah has something she wants to share with everyone." The table fell silent. Mom looked up from her plate with curiosity. Rachel finally stopped eating, and Dad's attention was fully focused on me for the first time all evening. I felt my heart racing as I looked around at their expectant faces. "David and I have wonderful news," I began, my voice shaking slightly with excitement. "We're going to have a baby." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched their faces, waiting for the joy and excitement I'd imagined. Instead, I saw something I couldn't quite identify. Shock. Yes, but something else too. Something that made my stomach clench with anxiety. Mom's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with what I initially thought was surprise. Rachel stopped mid-chew, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. But it was Dad's reaction that made my blood run cold. His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, then what looked like panic, then something that resembled fury. His hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles went white. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "How far along are you?" "About 12 weeks, I said, my excitement dimming as I registered the tension in his voice. "We wanted to wait until it was safe to tell everyone." Dad's fork clattered against his plate as he set it down with shaking hands. He looked at Mom, then at Rachel, then back at me. When he spoke again, his words hit me like physical blows. "That baby isn't welcome here." The words hung in the air like poison gas. I felt David's hand tighten on mine, heard Mom's sharp intake of breath, saw Rachel's face go pale. But I couldn't process what I'd just heard. Surely I'd misunderstood. "Dad, what did you say?" My voice came out as a whisper. "You heard me." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "That baby isn't welcome in this family." "Robert," Mom said, her voice pleading. "Please, no," Dad said, his voice rising. "I won't pretend this is good news. I won't sit here and celebrate when this—" He gestured wildly at me, at David, at my still flat stomach. "When this ruins everything we've worked for, how does our baby ruin anything?" David asked, his voice carefully controlled, but I could hear the anger underneath. "We're married, we're financially stable, we're ready to be parents." Dad laughed, but it was a bitter sound without any humor. "Ready? You think you're ready? You have no idea what you've done." "Robert, please sit down," Mom said, tears streaming down her face. "We can talk about this calmly." "There's nothing to talk about," Dad said, grabbing his reading glasses from the table. "I need some air." He stormed out of the dining room, leaving behind a wake of devastation. We could hear his footsteps on the stairs, then the slam of his bedroom door. The four of us sat in stunned silence, the remains of our family dinner growing, cold on our plates. "I don't understand," I said, my voice breaking. "What just happened?" Mom was crying openly now, her napkin pressed to her eyes. "He's just shocked, honey. Give him time to process." "Process what?" I demanded. "His daughter is having a baby. His first grandchild. What's there to process?" Rachel finally spoke, her voice uncharacteristically small. "Sarah, there are things you don't know about our family situation." "What kind of things?" David asked, putting his arm around my shoulders as I started to shake. "Financial things," Rachel said quietly. "Dad's business has been struggling for years. They've been borrowing money to keep up appearances." "What does that have to do with our baby?" I asked, but even as I spoke, I felt a chill of premonition. "Rachel?" And Mom exchanged a look that excluded me, a look that suggested they shared knowledge I didn't have. "It's complicated," Mom said finally. "Then uncomplicate it," David said firmly. "Explain to us how Sarah being pregnant is somehow a problem for your family." But Mom just shook her head, gathering dishes with trembling hands. "I need to clean up." Rachel helped me with the kitchen. As they bustled around clearing the table, I sat in my chair feeling like the ground had shifted beneath me. The dining room that had always felt like a sanctuary now felt like a crime scene. Dad's reading glasses lay abandoned on the table, and I stared at them as if they might provide answers to the questions swirling in my mind. David helped me to my feet, and we walked to our car in silence. As we drove home, I kept replaying the scene in my mind, searching for clues I might have missed. But no matter how many times I revisited those devastating moments, I couldn't make sense of what had happened. The pregnancy that was supposed to bring our family together had instead torn it apart, and I had no idea why. That night, I lay in bed with David's arms around me, one hand protectively covering my belly. "We're going to be okay," he whispered into the darkness. "Whatever this is about, we'll figure it out together." But as I stared at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been living a lie my entire life. The family I thought I knew, the love I thought was unconditional, the security I'd always taken for granted, all of it had crumbled in the space of 6 words. Dad's reading glasses haunted me. He'd left them behind in his haste to escape, and somehow they'd become a symbol of everything I didn't understand about the people I'd called family my whole life. The phone on my nightstand became my enemy over the next few days. It sat there, silent and accusatory, a stark reminder that not one member of my family had called to apologize, explain, or even check on me after Dad's explosive reaction. Found myself staring at it during breakfast, willing it to ring, desperate for some sign that the family I'd known my entire life still existed beneath the stranger who had rejected my unborn child. David tried to distract me with work around the house, small projects that usually brought us both joy. But even the sound of his hammer in the spare room, the room we'd planned to turn into a nursery, felt hollow and distant. Every few minutes, I'd catch myself listening for the phone, my heart jumping at every creak of the house or rumble of a passing car. Maybe I should call them, I said on Tuesday morning, reaching for the phone for the dozenth time. David gently moved my hand away. Sarah, you tried calling yesterday and the day before. Your mom said she needed time, remember? I did remember. Mom's voice had been strained and distant when she'd finally answered on Monday afternoon. I can't talk right now, honey, she'd said, as if I were a telemarketer interrupting her dinner. Your father is very upset and I need to give him space to work through this. But I don't understand what he needs to work through, I'd pleaded. Mom, I'm pregnant with your grandchild. This should be happy news. I know, sweetheart. I know it should be, but there are complications you don't understand. Then help me understand them. I can't. Not right now. Just give us some time, okay? The line had gone dead, leaving me holding the phone and wondering if I was losing my mind. Had I imagined 28 years of family dinners, Christmas mornings, and shared celebrations? Had the love I'd felt from my parents been conditional all along, based on some criteria I'd never been told about? Rachel hadn't answered her phone at all. I'd left 3 voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. Rachel, it's me. I need to talk to you. Please call me back. Then, hours later, Rachel, I don't understand what happened at dinner. Can you please just call me and explain? Finally, the next day, Rachel, I'm your sister. Whatever's going on, we can work through it. Please don't shut me out. Silence. The isolation was suffocating. I'd always known my social circle was small. Most of my friends from high school had moved away for college or jobs, and I'd never been good at making new friends as an adult. My family had been my anchor, my constant source of support and connection. Without them, I felt like I was floating in space, untethered and alone. David's family tried to fill the void. Carol called every evening to check on me, and Jim stopped by with groceries and offers to help with household repairs. They were kind and loving, but their concern only highlighted the absence of my own family's support. Have you heard from your parents? Carol asked gently on Wednesday evening. She was helping me organize the spare room, though we'd stopped calling it the nursery since Sunday's disaster. No, I said, folding tiny receiving blankets we'd bought weeks earlier in a moment of optimistic joy. It's like they've written me off completely. That can't be true, honey. Sometimes people need time to process big changes. But I could see the confusion in her eyes. Carol Sullivan was a woman who'd spent 30 years teaching elementary school, who understood children and families better than almost anyone I knew. She couldn't make sense of my parents' reaction any more than I could. The worst part was the physical symptoms of stress. The morning sickness I'd been experiencing became more severe, triggered now by anxiety as much as hormones. I couldn't keep food down, couldn't sleep, couldn't concentrate on anything except the crushing weight of my family's rejection. This isn't good for the baby, David said on Thursday morning, watching me push eggs around my plate without eating. All this stress, you need to take care of yourself? How can I take care of myself when I don't even understand what's happening? I snapped, then immediately felt guilty for taking my frustration out on him. I'm sorry. I need answers. David, I need to understand why my father looked at me like I was his enemy. David sat down across from me, his calloused hands gentle as he covered mine. Then we'll get answers, whatever it takes. That afternoon, I drove past my parents' house. I told myself I wasn't being stalky, just hopeful maybe if I saw them. In person, we could work through whatever misunderstanding had caused Sunday's explosion. But the house looked different somehow, less welcoming. The curtains were drawn tight, and Dad's truck was gone from the driveway. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, working up the courage to knock on the door. Finally, I walked up the familiar path to the front porch, my heart pounding as I rang the doorbell. Mom answered after a long delay, and I was shocked by how tired she looked. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes red-rimmed, and she was wearing an old housecoat I hadn't seen since I was a child. Sarah, she said, but she didn't open the screen door. What are you doing here? I'm your daughter, I said, fighting back tears. I'm pregnant with your grandchild. I'm here because I need my mother. For a moment, her face crumpled, and I thought she might pull me into her arms. But then she glanced back into the house and shook her head. Your father doesn't want you here right now. Then where is he? Let me talk to him. Let me understand what I did wrong. You didn't do anything wrong, Mom said quietly. But this baby, the timing is terrible, Sarah. There are things you don't know about our family situation. Then tell me, I begged. Help me understand. But Mom just shook her head again. I can't. I'm sorry, but I can't. She closed the door, leaving me standing on the porch where I posed for countless photos, where I'd waited for school buses and dates and all the milestones of my childhood. Now I was an outsider, vanished from the place that had always been my sanctuary. That night, I sat in our living room holding the phone, willing myself to try one more time. David was in the shower, and the house felt oppressively quiet. Finally, I dialed Rachel's number, praying she would answer. Sarah, Rachel's voice was carefully neutral when she picked up. How are you feeling? Terrible, I said honestly. Rachel, I need you to explain what happened at dinner. What did Dad mean when he said the baby ruins everything? There was a long pause. It's complicated. Stop saying that, I said, my voice rising. I'm tired of everyone telling me it's complicated. I'm your sister. I deserve to know what's going on. You do, Rachel said quietly, but I can't be the one to tell you. It's not my place. Whose place is it? Mom won't talk to me. Dad won't even see me. If you don't tell me, who will? Another pause. Sarah, there are things about our family that you've never known. Financial things. Dad made some bad decisions, and now what? Now your pregnancy affects more than just you and David. The line went quiet except for the sound of Rachel's breathing. I have to go, she said finally. I'm sorry, Sarah. I really am. After she hung up, I sat in the darkness of our living room, my hand resting on my still small belly. The baby inside me was growing every day, becoming more real, more mine. But somehow, this tiny life that should have brought joy had instead brought devastation. The unanswered phone mocked me from the coffee table. It had become a symbol of everything I'd lost, the easy communication with my family, the unconditional love I'd taken for granted, the simple happiness of sharing good news with the people who mattered most. I picked up the phone one last time and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Carol Sullivan answered on the second ring. Carol, it's Sarah. I know it's late, but honey, what's wrong? I need help. I don't know what to do. We'll be right over, she said without hesitation. 20 minutes later, David's parents were sitting in our living room, listening as I poured out the story of Sunday's disaster and the days of silence that followed. They didn't offer explanations or excuses for my family's behavior. They just listened, and when I finished, Carol pulled me into her arms. "You're not alone," she whispered. "This baby will be loved and wanted, no matter what anyone else says." For the first time since Sunday, I felt a small measure of peace. But as I fell asleep that night in David's arms, I couldn't shake the feeling that my real family, the people who'd raised me and shaped me, had become strangers overnight. And I had no idea how to find my way back to them. The soft knock on our front door came at nearly midnight on Friday, so quiet I almost thought I'd imagined it. David was already asleep beside me, exhausted from a long day trying to distract us both with home improvement projects. I lay still, for a moment listening, then heard it again, 3 gentle taps. Hesitant and afraid, I slipped out of bed and padded to the living room, my heart racing. Through the peephole, I saw Mom standing on our small front porch, her shoulders hunched against the October chill. She looked around nervously, as if she was afraid of being seen. "Mom?" I whispered as I opened the door. "What are you doing here?" She looked terrible. Her hair was hastily pulled back, her face was pale and drawn, and she was wearing her old navy coat over what looked like pajamas. But it was her eyes that scared me. They were the eyes of someone who hadn't slept in days. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. "I need to talk to you." I led her to the kitchen and put on the kettle, my hands shaking as I went through the familiar motions of making tea. Mom sat at our small table, her purse clutched tightly in her lap, looking around our modest home as if seeing it for the first time. "David doesn't know I'm here," she said suddenly. "Your father doesn't know either. He thinks I'm in bed." "Mom, what's going on? Why all the secrecy?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper, the kind of cream-colored stationery she used for thank you notes and birthday cards. Her handwriting covered both sides in blue ink, and I could see places where the ink had smudged, as if she'd been crying while she wrote. "I've been trying to write this letter for days," she said, setting it on the table between us. "I keep starting over, trying to find the right words to explain something that shouldn't need explaining." I reached for the letter, but she put her hand over mine, stopping me. "Sarah, before you read this, I need you to understand that your father isn't a bad man. He's made some poor choices, yes, but everything he's done has been because he loves this family." Loves this family? I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. "Mom, he said my baby isn't welcome here. How is that love?" Tears started flowing down her cheeks. "Because he's scared." "Because we're in trouble, and your pregnancy." She stopped, shaking her head. "Just read the letter, please." I unfolded the paper with trembling hands and began to read Mom's careful script. "My dearest Sarah, I don't know how to begin this conversation, so I'll start with the truth. Your father and I have been living a lie for the past 5 years. The successful construction business, the comfortable lifestyle. The money we've spent on Rachel's education, none of it has been real, Dot. Your father's business started failing during the recession, but instead of admitting it, he began borrowing money to keep up appearances. He took out loans against the house, maxed out credit cards, and when that wasn't enough, he started taking money from somewhere else. Sarah, you have a trust fund. Your great-grandmother left it to you when you were born, with instructions that you would gain full access to it when you turned 30 or got married and had a child, whichever came first. Your father has been the trustee all these years, and he's been using your money to pay our bills. The trust originally held $250,000. There's about $30,000 left." I stopped reading, the words blurring as my hands began to shake. "What does this mean?" I whispered. "It means," Mom said quietly, "that when you have this baby, you'll be entitled to what's left of your inheritance. And your father will have to explain where the rest of it went." I felt like I was drowning. "He stole from me. He borrowed from you," Mom said quickly. He always intended to pay it back. The business was supposed to recover. Rachel was going to become a doctor and help support the family. Everything was going to work out, but it didn't work out. No, it didn't. And now, she gestured helplessly. Now you're having a baby, which means you'll gain access to the trust, and there's nothing left to give you. I stood up so quickly my chair tipped backward, so Dad's reaction wasn't about me or my baby. It was about money, about protecting himself from getting caught. Sarah, please sit down. Let me finish explaining. What else is there to explain? I demanded. My father has been stealing from me for years, and when I announced my pregnancy, he realized he was about to be exposed. So instead of congratulating me, he decided my baby wasn't welcome because it threatens his ability to keep stealing from me. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. I began pacing our small kitchen, my mind racing. How long have you known about this? Mom's silence was answer enough. How long, Mom? 3 years, she whispered. I found out 3 years ago when I saw some bank statements he tried to hide, and you said nothing. You let him keep stealing from me. I tried to stop him. I begged him to tell you the truth, to ask for help instead of just taking your money. But he was so ashamed, so convinced he could fix everything before you found out. I laughed, but it came out harsh and bitter. So my whole family has been lying to me for years? Dad's been stealing from me, you've been covering for him, and does Rachel know? Mom nodded miserably. Her medical school tuition has been coming from your trust fund. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not just Dad, not just Mom, but Rachel too. My perfect sister, the family golden child, had been living off my inheritance while looking down on me for my modest lifestyle and working-class husband. Get out, I said quietly. Sarah, please get out of my house. My voice was rising, and I didn't care if I woke David or the neighbors. You come here in the middle of the night with this confession, thinking what? That I'd forgive you? That I'd be grateful you finally told me the truth? I thought you deserved to know. I deserved to know 5 years ago. I deserved to know when you found out 3 years ago. I deserved to know before I stood up at that dinner table and shared the happiest news of my life, only to be told my baby wasn't welcome. Mom was sobbing now, her careful composure completely broken. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I know we've hurt you terribly, but we're still your family. Are you? I asked. Because family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't lie for years and then show up with handwritten confessions when they're about to get caught. I picked up her letter from the table and read the rest quickly. It was full of justifications and excuses, explanations about business pressures and family obligations, pleas for understanding and forgiveness. But it didn't change the fundamental truth. My family had betrayed me in the worst possible way. Sarah, Mom said, standing up and reaching for me. I know you're angry, but don't touch me. I stepped back, putting the kitchen table between us. Don't you dare touch me. She froze, her hand extended, and for a moment I saw genuine pain in her eyes. That I was too angry, too hurt to care about her feelings. I want you to leave now, I said. And I want you to tell Dad and Rachel that I know. I know about the trust fund, I know about the money, and I know that my baby's only crime was threatening to expose your lies. What are you going to do? Mom asked, her voice small. I don't know yet, but I'm going to figure out exactly how much you've stolen from me, and I'm going to decide whether to forgive you or destroy you. Mom gathered her purse with shaking hands and walked to the front door. Before she left, she turned back to me one last time. For what it's worth, I am happy about the baby. Whatever else has happened, you're going to be a wonderful mother. Don't, I said. Don't you dare try to be the loving grandmother now. You lost that right when you chose to protect Dad instead of me. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table holding her letter, reading it over and over until the words were burned into my memory. The paper felt toxic in my hands, contaminated by years of lies and betrayal. When David found me there an hour later, I was still sitting in the dark, the letter spread out before me like evidence in a crime scene. "Sarah, what's wrong? Who is here?" I looked up at my husband, honest, hardworking David who'd never lied to me about anything, and I felt the last of my illusions about family love crumble away. "Everything," I said. "Everything is wrong." And then I told him about the trust fund, the stolen money, and the real reason my baby wasn't welcome in my father's house. Rachel showed up at my office on Monday afternoon, looking polished and professional in her crisp white coat. I was reviewing insurance claims when the receptionist told me someone was here to see me, and my heart stopped when I saw my sister. Standing in the waiting area, her medical school acceptance letter visible in the manila folder she clutched against her chest. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "Can you take a break?" I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years. Rachel had always been beautiful, but now I noticed things I'd missed before. Her designer purse, her expensive shoes, the way she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never worried about money. All of it, I now knew, had been bought with my inheritance. "I suppose I can spare a few minutes for my thieving sister," I said loudly enough for the other office workers to hear. Rachel's face flushed red. "Sarah, please, can we do this somewhere private?" I grabbed my jacket and led her to the small park across the street from my office. It was the same park where we played as children, where Mom had brought us to feed ducks and climb on the playground equipment. Now it felt like neutral ground, a place where we could have the conversation that would either salvage our relationship or destroy it completely. "Mom told me she came to see you," Rachel said as we sat on a bench overlooking the duck pond. "Did she tell you what we discussed?" "About the trust fund, yes." Rachel's voice was barely above a whisper. "Sarah, I need you to know that I didn't know about it until recently." "How recently?" "Last year. When I was applying for my residency programs, Dad mentioned that the family had been helping with my education costs. I asked him what he meant, and he told me about great-grandmother's trust fund." I turned to face her fully. "And what was your reaction when you found out your medical school tuition was being paid for with my money?" Rachel's hands were shaking as she opened the folder and pulled out her acceptance letter. The paper was crisp and official, with the medical school's letterhead at the top. "I was horrified," she said. "I told Dad I wanted to pay him back, but he said the family had already made the investment and I should just focus on becoming a doctor." "So you did focus on becoming a doctor, using my money?" "Yes." The word came out as a sob. "God, Sarah, yes. I've been living off your inheritance for 4 years, and I've hated myself for it every single day. I wanted to feel satisfaction at her guilt, but instead I just felt tired. Then why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was a coward. Because I was ashamed. Because I was terrified that if you knew the truth, you'd make me quit medical school." She looked down at the acceptance letter in her hands. "And because I was selfish. I wanted to be a doctor more than I wanted to be honest." We sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the ducks paddle around the pond. I remembered feeding them with Rachel when we were children, how she'd always made sure I got my fair share of breadcrumbs, even though she was the older sister. When had that generosity disappeared? "How much?" I asked finally. "How much what?" "How much of my money has gone to your education?" Rachel's voice was so quiet I could barely hear her. "About $60,000. The number hit me like a punch to the stomach. $60,000 more than David made in 2 years, enough to buy a house, enough to secure my baby's future. Gone, spent on my sister's dreams while I worked at the insurance office and worried about making rent. What else?" I asked. "What do you mean? What else has my money paid for? Your car? Your apartment? Your designer clothes?" Some of it, Rachel admitted. Dad gives me an allowance, says it's from the family, but now I know it was really from your trust fund. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. An allowance. My little sister gets an allowance from my inheritance while I clip coupons and buy generic groceries. Sarah, I'm going to pay it all back. Every penny. I'm going to get a job, take out loans, whatever it takes. With what money? You're a medical student. You don't have $60,000. I'll find a way. I'll quit school if I have to. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception, but all I saw was genuine anguish. For the first time since Sunday's dinner, I felt a flicker of sympathy for someone in my family. You really didn't know at first? I swear to you, Sarah, when I started medical school, I thought Dad's construction business was doing well. I thought the family was supporting my education because they believed in me. She wiped tears from her eyes with the back of her hand. I was so proud to be the first doctor in the family. I thought I was making everyone proud. You were making everyone proud. That's the problem. Rachel looked confused. What do you mean? I mean, you've been the golden child our entire lives. Perfect Rachel, with her perfect grades and perfect achievements. Do you have any idea what it's like to grow up in the shadow of someone like you? Someone like me? Someone who gets everything handed to her. Someone who never has to struggle or worry or wonder if she's good enough. I stood up, too agitated to sit still. Do you know that I wanted to be a teacher? That I dreamed about going to college and working with kids? Why didn't you? Because there was no money for my education. Because all the family resources were going to support your dreams. I turned back to face her, except now I find out there was money. My money, and it was all going to you. Rachel was crying openly now, her perfect composure completely broken. I didn't know, Sarah. I swear I didn't know. But you knew last year. You've known for months that you were living off my inheritance, and you never said anything. You sat at family dinners, you attended my wedding. You looked down on David and me for our modest lifestyle, all while you were spending my money. I wanted to tell you so many times. But Dad said what? He said that telling you would destroy the family. That you'd never forgive us, and it would tear everyone apart. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. He said the money was being used for the family's benefit, and that you'd understand someday. Someday when? When I became a doctor and could support everyone? When the construction business recovered? When she stopped, realizing how hollow it all sounded? When it was convenient for you to tell me the truth? Rachel nodded miserably. Yes, when it was convenient for us. I sat back down on the bench, suddenly exhausted. So Sunday night, when I announced my pregnancy, you all knew that it meant I'd gain access to whatever was left of my trust fund. Yes, Dad had been dreading this moment for years. And instead of being happy for me, instead of celebrating the fact that I was finally going to have a family of my own, you all panicked because it meant your free ride was over. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I stood up. Again, my anger returning. My baby, my wonderful, wanted baby, represents a threat to your comfortable lifestyle. That's why Dad said the baby wasn't welcome. Rachel tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. Sarah, please. I know we've hurt you terribly, but we're still family. Are we? Because family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't lie. For years about something this important. I looked at the acceptance letter still clutched in her hands. That letter represents 4 years of my life, 4 years of opportunities I never had because my money was being spent on you. I'll make it right, Rachel said desperately. I'll quit medical school, get a job, pay back. And then what? You'll resent me for the rest of your life because I ruined your dreams? You'll blame me for forcing you to give up medicine? No, yes, you will. Just like you've blamed me for being the difficult daughter, the one who wasn't smart enough or ambitious enough to make the family proud. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was small and broken. I never thought of you as difficult. I thought of you as free, free to make your own choices, to marry someone you loved instead of someone the family approved of, to work at jobs that made you happy instead of jobs that impressed people. She wiped her nose with a tissue. I've spent my whole life trying to be perfect, trying to justify everyone's expectations and investments. Do you know how exhausting that is? For a moment, I felt a flicker of understanding. Rachel had been trapped by her golden child status just as much as I'd been trapped by my ordinary one. But then I remembered $60,000 of my money, and the sympathy disappeared. Being exhausted by perfection is a luxury problem, Rachel. Being poor because your family stole from you is a real problem. She nodded, accepting the rebuke. You're right. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't pay me back. Sorry doesn't undo 4 years of lies. I picked up my purse, preparing to leave. I need time to figure out what I'm going to do about this. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about lawyers. I'm thinking about pressing charges. I'm thinking about making sure everyone in town knows exactly what kind of people the Mitchell family really are. Rachel went pale. Sarah, please don't do anything rash. Think about Mom. This would destroy her. Mom knew about the theft and said nothing. She chose her side 3 years ago. And think about Dad's business. If this gets out, he'll lose everything. He's already lost everything. He just hasn't admitted it yet. I started walking back toward my office, and Rachel, don't you dare try to contact me again until you figured out how to pay back every penny you stole from me. As I walked away, I could hear her crying behind me. Part of me wanted to turn around, to comfort her the way I had when we were children. But the larger part of me, the part that had just learned the true cost of family loyalty, kept walking. The acceptance letter to medical school had been Rachel's golden ticket, her proof that she was special and deserving of everyone's sacrifices. Now I knew the truth. It had been bought with my inheritance, my future, my dreams. And I was going to make sure she never forgot that fact. That evening, I sat at our kitchen table with a legal pad, a calculator, and a growing sense of determination. David was making dinner, occasionally glancing over at my makeshift investigation station with concern. I'd spent the afternoon calling the trust department at First National Bank, trying to get information about my great-grandmother's trust fund. Mrs. Sullivan, the bank representative, had said, I can confirm that you are the beneficiary of the Eleanor Mitchell Trust, but I cannot release specific information without proper authorization from the trustee. The trustee is my father, and he's been stealing from me, I'd said bluntly. There had been a long pause. If you believe there have been improprieties with the trust administration, I'd recommend you speak with an attorney. Now I was trying to piece together the financial puzzle using the fragments of information I'd gathered. According to Mom's letter, the trust had originally held $250,000. Rachel had admitted to receiving about $60,000 for medical school. That left $190,000 unaccounted for, plus whatever interest and growth the investments should have generated. Over the years, find anything interesting? David asked, setting a plate of spaghetti in front of me. I found out that my family has been systematically robbing me for years, I said, pushing numbers around on my calculator. And I think it's even worse than Mom admitted. David sat down across from me with his own plate. Worse how? I showed him my calculations. If the trust was worth $250,000 when I was born, and it was invested conservatively, it should be worth at least $400,000 by now, maybe more. And there's only $30,000 left, according to Mom. But I want to see the actual bank statements, the investment records, everything. I took a bite of spaghetti, barely tasting it. I want to know exactly when the withdrawals started and what they were supposedly for. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the county courthouse. If Dad's construction business was really in trouble. There would be public records, liens, judgments, maybe even bankruptcy filings. I'd never done this kind of research before, but desperation was a powerful motivator. The clerk in the records office was helpful, showing me how to search for documents related to Mitchell Construction. What I found made my stomach turn. Dad's business troubles went back further than Mom had admitted. There were unpaid contractor liens dating back 6 years, multiple judgments from suppliers, and several tax liens from the IRS. The most recent filing was particularly damning. Noticed that the family home was in foreclosure proceedings. Excuse, I said to the clerk. This foreclosure notice is dated 3 months ago. Does that mean the house is being sold? She looked at the document. It means the bank has started proceedings, but they can be stopped if the debt is brought current. Sometimes families work out payment plans. I made copies of everything I'd found and drove home with a growing sense of unreality. The perfect family image that had defined my childhood was completely false. Not only were my parents not financially successful, they were on the verge of losing everything. That afternoon, I called my high school friend Jenny, who worked as a paralegal at a law firm in Nashville. We hadn't talked in months, but she was the only person I knew with legal experience. Sarah, how are you? I heard you got married. Congratulations. Jenny, I need help. Legal help. My family has been stealing from me, and I don't know what to do. There was a pause. That's a serious accusation. What kind of stealing? I explained about the trust fund, the missing money, and Dad's role as trustee. Jenny listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of sympathy or disbelief. Okay, she said when I finished. First thing you need to do is get copies of all the trust documents and bank statements. As the beneficiary, you have a legal right to that information. But Dad is the trustee. Won't he have to authorize the release? Not necessarily. If you have reason to believe he's breached his fiduciary duty, you can petition the court for access to the records. But Sarah, this is going to get ugly fast. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared for the truth, I said, no matter how ugly it is. Jenny gave me the name of a trust and estate attorney in town and promised to put in a good word for me. Eleanor Whitfield, she said. She's tough, she's fair, and she doesn't put up with trustee misconduct. The next day, I sat in Eleanor Whitfield's office, a stack of bank statements spread across her mahogany desk. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes, and she'd spent the past hour reviewing the documents I'd managed to obtain. Mrs. Sullivan, she said finally, this is one of the most egregious cases of trustee misconduct I've seen in 30 years of practice. My heart sank. How bad is it? She pulled out a thick folder and opened it to reveal page after page of bank statements, withdrawal slips, and transfer records. Your father has been treating your trust fund as his personal piggy bank for the past 8 years. The pattern is clear. Whenever his business had cash flow problems, he'd transfer money from your trust to his business account. How much? Including the medical school payments to your sister. He's withdrawn approximately $320,000 from the trust. The number hit me like a physical blow. $320,000. That's above and beyond what the trust should have earned in interest and growth. The trust was conservatively invested, but it still should have generated substantial returns over 28 years. She showed me an investment summary. Based on the original $250,000 in reasonable market returns, your trust should be worth approximately $650,000 today. I felt dizzy. So he didn't just steal my inheritance, he stole my children's inheritance too. I'm afraid so. And there's more. She pulled out another document. 3 months ago, your father transferred the remaining balance of the trust to his personal checking account. All of it. Every penny. But Mom said there was still $30,000 left. Your mother lied to you. The trust account has a balance of 0. I stared at the bank statement showing the final transfer. The Eleanor Mitchell Trust, established with love by my great-grandmother to ensure her great-granddaughter's future, had been completely wiped out by the very person entrusted to protect it. What can I do? I asked. Several things. First, we file a petition with the court to remove your father as trustee and demand a full accounting of all trust assets. Second, we pursue criminal charges for embezzlement and breach of fiduciary duty. Third, we sue to recover the stolen funds. Can we actually get the money back? Eleanor's expression was grim. That depends on what assets your father has left. From what you've told me about his business troubles, there may not be much to recover. I thought about the foreclosure notice I'd found, about the liens and judgments against Dad's business. What if he doesn't have any money left? Then we go after any property or assets he transferred to avoid liability. We can also pursue your sister for the educational funds she received, since she knew they weren't rightfully hers. The thought of suing Rachel made my stomach turn, but I pushed the feeling aside. How long would all this take? Months, possibly. Years. And it's going to be expensive. Legal fees, court costs, investigation expenses. It adds up quickly. I don't have that kind of money. That's the whole problem. Eleanor smiled for the first time since I'd walked into her office. Mrs. Sullivan, in cases of trustee misconduct this egregious, the court often orders the breaching trustee to pay the beneficiary's legal fees. Your father will likely end up paying for his own prosecution. I left Eleanor's office with a briefcase full of legal documents and a plan of action that both terrified and exhilarated me. For the first time since that devastating Sunday dinner, I felt like I had some measure of control over my situation. That evening, I sat with David on our couch, the bank statement spread out on our coffee table like evidence in a crime scene. The final account summary showed the devastating truth. Eleanor Mitchell Trust, balance, $0. I keep staring at this, I said, holding up the statement. $0. 28 years of my great-grandmother's love and planning, and he turned it into nothing. David pulled me close. Not nothing. He turned it into Rachel's medical degree and 8 years of propping up a failing business. That money still exists, it's just not where it should be. Eleanor says we can get some of it back, but not all of it. And not quickly. What matters is that we're fighting back. That we're not letting them get away with this. I looked around our modest living room with its secondhand furniture and yard sale decorations. All this time, I thought we were just a young couple starting out, making do with what we had while we saved for the future. Now I knew the truth. I should have been able to buy us a house, pay off David's truck, maybe even start my own business. Dude, you know what the worst part is? I said, what? The way they made me feel guilty for not being more successful. The way they acted like David and I were somehow lacking because we couldn't afford the things they had. I picked up another bank statement, this one showing a $15,000 withdrawal marked home improvements. They were living off my money while looking down on us for being poor. David was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? I'm going to destroy them, I said simply. I'm going to expose every lie, recover every penny I can, and make sure everyone in town knows exactly what Robert Mitchell really is. And your mom, Rachel? They made their choices. Mom chose to protect Dad instead of me. Rachel chose to keep taking my money even after she knew where it was coming from. I folded the bank statements and put them back in my briefcase. Now they get to live with the consequences. That night, I lay in bed with my hand on my growing belly, thinking about the child who would never benefit from their great-great-grandmother's generosity. But as I drifted off to sleep, I made a promise to my unborn baby. I would fight for what was rightfully ours, no matter how long it took or how much it hurt. This child would grow up knowing their mother was strong enough to stand. up to anyone, even family, when it came to protecting what mattered most. Eleanor Whitfield called me early Thursday morning with news that changed everything. "Mrs. Sullivan, I've been digging deeper into your great-grandmother's will, and I found something significant. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" I arrived to find Eleanor's conference room filled with boxes of documents, some dating back decades. She'd clearly been working through the night, and her usual professional composure was replaced by something that looked like righteous fury. "Sit down, Sarah," she said, pulling out a thick leather folder. "What I'm about to show you is going to be difficult to hear, but it's information you need to have." She opened the folder to reveal the original will of Eleanor Mitchell, my great-grandmother. The document was typed on heavy paper, with elegant script signatures and official seals. It looked important, final, and somehow sacred. "Your great-grandmother was a remarkable woman," Eleanor began. "She was widowed young during World War II, but she managed to build a small fortune through smart investments and careful saving. When she died in 1995, she left specific instructions about your inheritance." She pointed to a paragraph near the bottom of the will. "Read this section here." I read aloud, "To my great-granddaughter, Sarah Mitchell, I leave the sum of $250,000 to be held in trust until she reaches the age of 30 or marries and has a child, whichever comes first. This money is intended to provide Sarah with the independence and security that every woman deserves, and it is my express wish that she use it to pursue her dreams without interference from family members who may not understand or support her choices." My throat tightened as I read the last part. Great-grandmother Eleanor had known. Somehow she'd anticipated that the family might try to control my choices, and she'd tried to protect me. "There's more," Eleanor said, turning the page. She also left detailed instructions about the trustee's responsibilities. The next section was even more specific. The trustee is directed to provide Sarah with annual statements of the trust's performance and to involve her in investment decisions once she reaches the age of 25. Under no circumstances should trust funds be used for any purpose other than Sarah's direct benefit, and any violation of this directive should result in immediate removal of the trustee and potential criminal prosecution. I looked up at Eleanor. Dad was supposed to give me annual statements every year starting when you turned 25. That was 3 years ago. She pulled out another folder. "I found no evidence that you ever received these reports." I didn't even know the trust existed until Mom told me." Eleanor's expression darkened. "That's a serious violation of the trust terms, but it gets worse." She showed me another document. "Your great-grandmother also included a provision that if you gained access to the trust due to marriage and pregnancy, an additional $100,000 would be added from her estate reserve fund." My heart stopped. "What?" "Your great-grandmother set aside extra money specifically for when you started a family. She wanted to ensure that her great-great-grandchildren would have the best possible start in life." Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. "That means your inheritance wasn't just $250,000. It was $350,000, plus 28 years of compound interest." The room spun around me. Not only had Dad stolen my original inheritance, but he'd also stolen money specifically intended for my unborn child. My great-grandmother had tried to reach across the decades to provide for her great-great-grandchild, and Dad had stolen that love too. How much should the trust be worth now? I whispered. Eleanor consulted her calculator. "With conservative investments and compound growth, approximately $850,000. $850,000. Nearly $1 million. Money that could have bought David and me a beautiful home, could have funded my education, could have secured our child's future. All of it gone, stolen by the man who was supposed to protect it." "There's one more thing," Eleanor said quietly. She pulled out a small envelope with my name written on it in my great-grandmother's careful handwriting. This was sealed with a will, with instructions that it be given to you when you gained access to the trust. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope and unfolded a single sheet of cream-colored paper. My dearest Sarah, if you are reading this, it means you have reached one of life's most important milestones, either your 30th birthday or the beginning of your own family. I'm so proud of the woman I know you will become. I want you to know that this money comes with no strings attached. It is yours to use as you see fit, whether that means pursuing education, starting a business, traveling the world, or simply having the security of knowing you can take care of yourself and your loved ones. I chose to give this money to you rather than to your parents or sister because I believe you have a kind heart and a practical mind. I trust you to use it wisely and to remember that true wealth comes not from money itself, but from the freedom to make choices based on love rather than fear. Your father has agreed to serve as trustee, and I believe he will honor his responsibilities to you. However, if you ever feel that your inheritance is being mismanaged or misused, please do not hesitate to seek legal counsel. This money is yours and yours alone. I wish I could be there to see the wonderful things you will accomplish. In your life, know that you are loved, you are valued, and you deserve every happiness this world has to offer. With all my love. Great-grandmother Eleanor was sobbing by the time I finished reading. My great-grandmother had loved me enough to provide for. My future had trusted me enough to give me complete control over my inheritance, and had even warned me about the possibility of mismanagement. She tried to protect me from exactly what had happened. Sarah, Eleanor said gently, I need you to understand something important. Your great-grandmother's will is very specific about the consequences of trustee misconduct. Your father isn't just liable for civil damages, he's committed a felony. A felony, embezzlement of trust funds, is a serious crime. Based on the amount involved and the duration of the misconduct, he could face significant prison time. The thought of Dad in prison should have upset me, but all I felt was a cold satisfaction. He'd made his choices, and now he would face the consequences. What do we do next? First, we file an emergency petition to freeze any remaining assets your father might have. Then we notify the district attorney's office about the criminal violations. Finally, we begin the process of trying to recover what we can. Eleanor gathered the documents into neat piles. Sarah, I want you to prepare yourself for what's coming. This is going to be a long, difficult process. Your family is going to fight back. They're going to try to make you feel guilty, and they're going to claim that everything they did was for your own good. It wasn't for my good. It was for their convenience. I know that, and you know that, but they're going to paint this as a family misunderstanding rather than criminal theft. They're going to say your father was just borrowing the money and always intended to pay it back. I thought about all the years of feeling inadequate, all the times I'd apologized for not being as successful as Rachel, all the ways I'd made myself smaller to fit into their vision of who I should be. I don't care what they say, I want justice. Then we'll get it. Eleanor's smile was fierce. Your great-grandmother chose well when she decided to trust you with this inheritance. Even stolen, it's taught you something valuable about your own worth. As I drove home that afternoon, I carried great-grandmother Eleanor's letter in my purse like a talisman. For the first time in my life, I understood that I came from a legacy of strong women who believed in independence and self-determination. My great-grandmother had reached across the decades to tell me that I was worthy of love, respect, and financial security. Dad had stolen my money, but he couldn't steal the deeper message. I deserve better than what my family had given me, and I had the power to demand it. That night, I sat with David and read him great-grandmother Eleanor's letter. When I finished, we were both crying. She sounds like an amazing woman, David said. She was trying to give me what my own parents couldn't: unconditional love and support. I folded the letter carefully, and they stole that too. No, David said firmly. They stole the money, but they couldn't steal her love. That letter proves she believed in you, and nothing they did can change that. He was right. Great-grandmother Eleanor's will was more than a legal document. It was proof that I was worthy of love and investment, that my dreams mattered, and that I had the right to expect honesty and respect from the people who claimed to care about me. My family had stolen my inheritance, but they'd also given me something valuable, the knowledge that I was strong enough to fight back, smart enough to seek help, and worthy of justice. And I was going to make sure they understood exactly what that meant. Rachel appeared at my door again on Saturday morning, but this time she looked different. Her usual polished appearance was gone, her hair was unwashed, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and an old sweatshirt, and she carried a manila envelope thick with papers. Most telling of all, she had dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and difficult decisions. "I brought something for you," she said without preamble when I opened the door. I almost didn't let her in. After learning the full extent of the theft, after reading great-grandmother Eleanor's letter, I'd spent the past 2 days in a cold fury that extended to everyone who'd participated in the deception. But something in Rachel's demeanor stopped me from slamming the door. "What is it?" I asked, stepping aside to let her enter. She set the envelope on our coffee table and pulled out a stack of papers. Every medical school bill I've ever received. Every tuition payment, every book allowance, every living expense check. Her voice was shaky. "I've calculated exactly how much of your money I've taken over the past 4 years. I sat down across from her and looked at the papers. They were organized meticulously, with subtotals for each semester and a grand total circled in red at the bottom. The number was even higher than she'd admitted before. $73,000. $73,000, I said aloud, plus interest, if you want to calculate it that way. Rachel pulled out another sheet of paper. "I also listed everything else the family bought with your money. The car Dad got me for graduation, the apartment deposit for medical school, the clothes allowance Mom said was from the family budget." I scanned the secondary list. Designer, clothes, a reliable car, spring break trips, a laptop for school, medical equipment, professional clothing for clinical rotations. All the things that had made me feel inadequate about my own modest lifestyle had been purchased with my inheritance. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because I'm quitting medical school." The words hung in the air between us. I stared at my sister, trying to process what she'd just said. "You're what?" "I'm withdrawing from medical school. I've already drafted the letter." She pulled out another document, her formal withdrawal notice. "I can't continue my education, knowing it's built on stolen money. Rachel, you're 6 months away from graduating. You've put in 4 years, 4 years of living off your inheritance." Her voice was firm, but I could see tears forming in her eyes. "Sarah, I've been thinking about this nonstop since our conversation at the park. Every class 1 attend, every exam I take, every clinical rotation I complete, it's all tainted by the knowledge that it was bought with money that should have secured your future." I looked at the withdrawal letter, then back at my sister. "This is what you want. It's what I have to do. It's the only way I can start to make this right." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I've also been looking into what I can do to pay you back immediately. With what money? You're a student. I can sell the car Dad bought me. I can liquidate my small savings account. I can get a job, take out personal loans." She pulled out yet another sheet of paper. "I've already talked to 3 different lenders about consolidation loans to pay you back." The papers showed loan applications, payment plans, and debt consolidation options. Rachel had clearly spent considerable time researching how to extract herself from the web of financial dependence our family had created. "This would destroy your credit," I said, scanning the loan terms. "Good. Maybe it should be destroyed." Maybe I need to learn what it's like to actually struggle for something instead of having everything handed to me. I set the papers down and really looked at my sister. For the first time in years, she looked human rather than perfect. The golden child facade had cracked, revealing someone who was genuinely struggling with guilt and responsibility. What did Mom and Dad say when you told them you were quitting? Rachel's laugh was bitter. Dad screamed at me. Sad I was throwing away the family's investment, that I was being dramatic and stupid. Mom cried and begged me to reconsider. She shrugged. I told them their investment was stolen money and I didn't want any part of it anymore. And Dad said that if I quit medical school, I was no longer his daughter. The words hit me like a physical blow. As angry as I was with Rachel, I knew what it felt like to be rejected by her father. I'm sorry. Don't be. It actually felt liberating. Rachel gathered her papers into neat piles. Do you know what the worst part of being the golden child is? Tell me. You never know if people love you for who you are or for what you accomplish. Every achievement becomes a debt you owe to everyone who invested in you. She looked around our modest living room. I've been jealous of you for years. Jealous of me. You gotta marry someone you actually loved instead of someone who looked good on paper. You gotta work jobs that interested you instead of careers that impressed other people. You gotta be yourself instead of being the family's poster child for success. I thought about all the years I'd envied Rachel's achievements, her confidence, her apparent ease with our parents' expectations. I had no idea you felt that way. How could you? I was too busy playing the role of perfect daughter to be honest about how much pressure I was under. She pulled out one final document, which is why I'm also doing this. It was a formal complaint to the medical school's ethics board, detailing how her education had been funded through embezzled trust funds. The document was signed and dated, ready to be submitted. Rachel, this could ruin your reputation. Even if you wanted to go back to medical school later, I won't want to go back. Not like this. She stood up, leaving all the papers on our coffee table. Sarah, I know you have every right to hate me. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life making this right. What will you do now? I'm moving back home temporarily, just long enough to sell everything I own and figure out a payment plan for you. Then I'm getting my own apartment and finding a job. She paused at our front door. I'm thinking about teaching. Elementary school, maybe. It doesn't pay much, but it's honest work. After she left, I sat staring at the pile of documents she'd left behind. The medical school bills, the loan applications, the withdrawal letter, the ethics complaint together. They represented the complete dismantling of the golden child myth that had defined our family for so long. David found me there an hour later, still processing what had happened. She's really quitting medical school? He asked, looking at the withdrawal letter. She says she can't continue knowing it was built on stolen money. What do you think? I considered the question carefully. I think she's finally being honest. About the money, about the pressure, about what our family dynamic really cost both of us. Are you going to let her pay you back? Some of it, yes. She needs to face the consequences of her choices, but I'm not going to let her destroy her entire future over this. I picked up the loan applications. These interest rates would cripple her for decades. So what's the plan? I think we work out a reasonable payment schedule. Something that holds her accountable without ruining her life. I thought about great-grandmother Eleanor's letter about the importance of making choices based on love rather than fear. And maybe I help her figure out how to go back to school eventually, but paying her own way this time. That evening, I called Rachel and told her I'd accept a payment plan for half of what she'd taken, with the understanding that she would complete medical school on her own dime when she was financially able. You don't have to do that, she said. Her voice thick with tears. I know I don't have to. But great-grandmother Eleanor's letter talked about making choices based on love rather than fear. I'm choosing to believe that you're genuinely sorry and that you've learned from this. I have. I promise you I have. Then prove it. Be the sister I needed you to be all along. Be honest, be supportive, and stop pretending our family's dysfunction is normal. I will. And Sarah, thank you for giving me a chance to make this right. As I hung up the phone, I realized that Rachel's withdrawal from medical school represented more than just accountability. It represented the end of the golden child system that had poisoned our family relationships for years. For the first time, we were going to be sisters rather than competitors, equals rather than the favorite, and the disappointment. It was a small step toward healing, but it was a step in the right direction. The contrast between my family's response to our pregnancy and David's family's reaction couldn't have been more stark. While my own parents had rejected my unborn child and stolen my inheritance, the Sullivans had embraced us with a warmth that made me understand what unconditional love actually looked like. It was David's father, Jim, who first brought up the practical side of our situation. We were sitting in the Sullivans' modest kitchen on Sunday afternoon, the same weekend Rachel had quit medical school, when he set down his coffee cup and looked at me with serious eyes. Sarah, honey, I hope you don't mind me asking, but how are you and David handling all this legal business? Lawyers can be expensive. I appreciated his directness. Jim Sullivan was a retired electrician who'd worked with his hands his whole life, and he had no patience for dancing around difficult topics. We're managing, I said, though I wasn't sure that was entirely true. Managing isn't the same as thriving, Jim said gently. Carol and I have been talking and we want to help. Mr. Sullivan, we can accept. You can and you will. Carol's voice was firm as she joined us at the table. Family helps family, and you're family now. David reached for my hand under the table. Dad, we appreciate the offer, but nothing, Jim interrupted. David, you've been working yourself into the ground trying to take on extra jobs to pay for legal fees and doctor bills. That's not sustainable, especially with a baby coming. He was right. David had been taking on additional contracting work, sometimes putting in 12-hour days to earn extra money. I'd been working overtime at the insurance office, pushing myself harder than I should while pregnant. The stress of the legal battle combined with financial pressure was wearing on both of us. What are you proposing? I asked. Jim pulled out a folder from the kitchen counter. I've been looking at your situation, and I think there's a better way to handle this. The folder contained business plans, financial projections, and legal documents I didn't recognize. Jim spread them out on the table with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent decades planning electrical installations. David's been talking for years about expanding his business, taking on bigger projects, maybe hiring some help, Jim began. But he's always been held back by lack of capital and limited equipment. Dad, we've talked about this. I can't afford to expand right now. That's where we come in. Carol pulled out a bank statement. Your father and I have been saving for retirement, but we've got more put away than we need. We want to invest in Sullivan Construction. The numbers on the bank statement made my eyes widen. Jim and Carol had been careful savers their entire lives, and their retirement account was substantial enough to fund a significant business expansion. This isn't charity, Jim continued. This is a business investment. We become silent partners. In your company, you use our capital to buy better equipment and take on bigger jobs, and everyone benefits. David was staring at the documents with disbelief. Dad, this is your retirement money. Son, what good is retirement money if we can't help our children when they need it? Carol's voice was gentle but firm. Besides, we believe in you. We've always believed in you. The business plan Jim had prepared was thorough and realistic. With additional capital, Sullivan Construction could bid on larger residential projects, maybe even some commercial work. The increased revenue would allow David to hire employees, reducing his workload while expanding the business. There's another advantage, Jim added. If your business is more successful, you'll have better financial standing when it comes to recovering money from your father. Courts look favorably on plaintiffs who can demonstrate financial stability. I looked at David, seeing the mix of hope and uncertainty in his eyes. His family was offering us exactly what mine had stolen: financial security and the freedom to build our own future. What would you expect in return? I asked. 20% of the business profits, Jim said. Fair market rate for our investment, nothing more. And if you want to buy us out later, we'll negotiate a reasonable price. Carol leaned forward. Sarah, we know this is difficult for you. Your own family has betrayed your trust, and now we're asking you to trust us with your future. But I want you to know something. We're not doing this because we feel sorry for you. We're doing this because we believe in both of you. The difference between their offer and my family's behavior was overwhelming. The Sullivans were proposing a genuine partnership based on mutual benefit and respect. My family had simply taken what they wanted without asking. Can we think about it? David asked. Of course, Jim said. Take all the time you need. But don't take too long. Good opportunities don't wait forever. That evening, David and I sat on our front porch, watching the sunset and discussing his parents' offer. The business plan lay between us on the porch swing, representing possibilities I'd never dared to imagine. What do you think? David asked. I think your parents are offering us what my great-grandmother tried to give me, the chance to build something meaningful with people who actually care about our success. It's a big risk. What if the business fails? What if it succeeds? I countered. David, you're talented and hardworking. You've been held back by lack of capital, not lack of ability. David picked up the business plan and flipped through the projected income statements. With this kind of expansion, we could buy a house within 2 years. We could put money away for the baby's education. We could actually build the life we've been dreaming about. And we could do it with people who want us to succeed, not people who see our success as a threat to their own comfort. The next morning, David called his father and accepted the partnership offer. Within a week, Jim had transferred the investment funds, and David had placed orders for new equipment. The transformation was immediate. David went from being a struggling small contractor to the owner of a legitimate construction company with real growth potential. The timing couldn't have been better. Eleanor Whitfield had estimated that the legal battle with my family could take months or even years, and the financial stress had been weighing heavily on both of us. Now, with David's business expanding and our income stabilizing, we could focus on the legal fight without worrying about making rent. More importantly, the Sullivans' investment gave me something I hadn't expected: hope. For years I'd believed that success required sacrificing relationships, that ambition meant choosing between family and personal happiness. David's parents showed me that it was possible to have both, that good people could work together to build something meaningful without betraying each other. You know what the best part is? I told David one evening as we reviewed the business's first monthly profit statement. What's that? Your parents didn't just give us money. They gave us a model for how families should actually work supporting each other's dreams instead of stealing from them. David smiled and pulled me close. That's the kind of family I want our baby to grow up in. They will, I promised. No matter what happens with my parents, this baby will grow up surrounded by people who believe in honesty, hard work, and taking care of each other. The business plan that Jim had prepared became more than just a financial document. It became a symbol of what was possible when people chose to build each other up instead of tearing each other down. And as our baby grew inside me, I felt confident. that they would inherit something far more valuable than money. They would inherit the knowledge that they were wanted, supported, and loved by people who would never sacrifice their well-being for personal gain. Eleanor Whitfield's office had become my second home over the past month. The conference room where we met was filled with boxes of evidence, legal briefs, and financial documents that told the story of my family's betrayal in excruciating detail. Today's meeting was different, though today we were moving from investigation to action. Sarah, before we proceed with filing formal charges, I want you to understand exactly what we're dealing with, Eleanor said, spreading a collection of legal documents across the mahogany table. These aren't just civil matters anymore. We're talking about multiple felonies. The documents she'd prepared were intimidating in their scope and precision. Criminal complaints, civil lawsuits, asset recovery petitions, and restraining orders, designed to prevent my father from disposing of any remaining assets. Each one represented a different avenue for holding my family accountable for their actions. Let's start with the criminal charges, Eleanor continued, pulling out a thick folder. Based on the evidence we've gathered, your father can be charged with embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraudulent conversion of trust assets. Given the amount involved, over $600,000 when you include the loss growth potential, these are all felony charges. I stared at the criminal complaint she drafted. Seeing my father's full name, Robert James Mitchell, listed as the defendant made everything feel suddenly real and irreversible. What kind of sentence would he be looking at for embezzlement of this magnitude? Potentially 5 to 10 years in prison, plus restitution and fines. Eleanor's voice was matter-of-fact, but I could see the sympathy in her eyes. Sarah, I need you to be absolutely certain about pursuing criminal charges. Once we file these documents, there's no going back. What about civil recovery? Can't we just sue him for the money? We're doing that too. She pulled out another set of documents. But here's the problem. Your father appears to have very few recoverable assets left. The business is insolvent, the house is in foreclosure, and his personal accounts are nearly empty. Eleanor showed me an asset investigation report that painted a grim picture of my father's financial situation. Mitchell Construction owed more than it was worth. The family home had negative equity due to multiple liens, and Dad's checking account had a balance of less than $3,000. So even if we win a civil judgment, there's nothing to collect. Not necessarily. Eleanor's smile was sharp. There are several avenues we can pursue. First, we can go after assets he may have hidden or transferred to avoid liability. Second, we can seek garnishment of any future income. Third, we can pursue your sister for the educational funds she received, since she knew they were improperly obtained. The thought of pursuing Rachel legally made my stomach turn, even though I was still angry with her. Is that necessary? She's already quit medical school and is trying to pay me back. That's your decision to make. But from a legal standpoint, she received stolen property knowing it was stolen. The fact that she's shown remorse doesn't eliminate her liability. Eleanor pulled out a financial analysis that took my breath away. However, there is one significant asset your father still controls, and it's the key to our entire strategy. She showed me a property deed I'd never seen before. It was for a piece of commercial land outside town, purchased 5 years ago under the name of a limited liability company that my father controlled. What is this? Your father bought this land using trust funds, but he put it in the name of a shell company to hide it from creditors. It's worth approximately $200,000 in the current market. I studied the deed, noting the purchase date and the amount paid. He bought this with my money. Absolutely. And because he used trust funds for the purchase, the land legally belongs to you, not to him or his creditors. Eleanor's satisfaction was evident. This is going to be the cornerstone of our asset recovery case. The land represented the largest single recoverable asset from my stolen inheritance. While it wasn't the full amount Dad had taken, It was substantial enough to provide real financial security for David, the baby, and me. There's more, Eleanor continued. I've been investigating your father's business partners and financial relationships. It appears he's been less than honest with several people about his situation. She showed me correspondence between Dad and various business associates, revealing a pattern of deception that extended far beyond my trust fund. He'd been inflating his company's value to secure loans, hiding debts from potential partners, and generally operating his business through systematic fraud. This could be helpful, Eleanor explained. If other people have been defrauded by your father's business practices, they may be willing to cooperate with our investigation. Their testimony could strengthen our criminal case. The scope of Dad's deception was staggering. It wasn't just my trust fund. He'd been operating a web of financial lies for years, borrowing against assets that didn't exist and making promises he couldn't keep. What about Mom? I asked. What's her legal exposure in all this? Eleanor's expression grew serious. That's complicated. She knew about the trust fund misuse for at least 3 years, but she wasn't the trustee and didn't directly control the funds. However, she did benefit from the stolen money, and she concealed the theft from you, so she could be charged too. Possibly, but it's less likely. Prosecutors tend to focus on the primary perpetrator unless there's evidence of active participation in the scheme. Eleanor paused. Of course, if she tries to help your father hide assets or obstruct our investigation, that changes things significantly. I thought about Mom's midnight visit, her tearful confession, her obvious guilt and fear. She'd been complicit in the theft, but she'd also been the one to finally tell me the truth. I don't want to pursue criminal charges against Mom unless she forces my hand, I said finally. That's reasonable. But we should be prepared for the possibility that she be called as a witness in your father's criminal trial. She'll have to choose between protecting him and telling the truth under oath. Eleanor gathered the documents into organized piles. Sarah, I need to ask you one more time. Are you prepared for what this is going to do to your family? Criminal, prosecution, asset seizure, public exposure of their financial crimes. This is going to destroy what's left of your relationship with your parents. I thought about great-grandmother Eleanor's letter, about her belief that true wealth came from the freedom to make choices based on love rather than fear. My parents had chosen fear of exposure, fear of losing their comfortable lifestyle, fear of admitting their failures. They'd made those choices at my expense, and now they would face the consequences. My family destroyed our relationship when they decided to steal from me, I said firmly. I'm not destroying anything, I'm just refusing to keep their secrets anymore. And if your father goes to prison, then he'll have time to think about the choices that led him there. I touched my growing belly, thinking about the child who would grow up hearing this story. I want my baby to know that their mother stood up for what was right, even when it was difficult. Eleanor nodded with approval. In that case, we'll file the criminal complaints tomorrow morning. The civil suits will follow within the week. As I left Eleanor's office that afternoon, I carried with me a briefcase full of legal documents that would change my family forever. The criminal complaints, civil lawsuits, and asset recovery petitions represented more than just legal action. They represented my refusal to accept that family loyalty meant tolerating theft and lies. That evening, I called my parents' house one last time. Dad answered the phone, his voice wary when he heard my voice. Sarah, what do you want? I wanted to give you one last chance to make this right, I said. To voluntarily return what's left of my inheritance and face the consequences of your actions with some dignity. There was a long pause. I don't know what you're talking about. Dad, I know about the trust fund. I know about the hidden land purchase. I know about all of it. You don't understand the pressures I've been under. I understand that you stole from me, I understand that you put your comfort ahead of my future and my child's future. My voice was steady, calmer than I felt. Tomorrow morning, criminal charges will be filed against you. You'll be arrested, probably at your office, probably in front of your employees and customers. Sarah, you can't. I can and I will. Unless you want to meet with my lawyer tonight and work out a voluntary surrender of assets. This is going to become very public very quickly. The line was quiet except for the sound of Dad's labored breathing. Finally, he spoke, and his voice was different, smaller, older, defeated. How much do you want? Everything, Dad. I want every penny you stole, plus interest, plus compensation for the opportunities you cost me. I paused. But mostly, I want you to admit what you did and face the consequences like an adult. And if I don't, then you'll face them like a criminal instead. After I hung up, I sat with David in our living room, the legal documents spread out on our coffee table like battle plans. Tomorrow would change everything for my family, for my relationship with my parents, and for the future I was building with David and our unborn child. Are you ready for this? David asked. I'm ready for justice, I said. And I'm ready to show our baby that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. The legal documents represented more than just a lawsuit. They represented my transition from victim to survivor, from someone who accepted betrayal to someone who demanded accountability. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. Dad didn't call that night. When morning came, I knew he'd chosen to face this the hard way. At 9 a.m. sharp, Eleanor filed the criminal complaints with the district attorney's office. By noon, a warrant had been issued for Robert James Mitchell's arrest. I wasn't there when they arrested him, but I heard about it from 3 different sources within an hour. Dad had been at his office, meeting with a potential client about a bathroom renovation, when 2 sheriff's deputies arrived with handcuffs and a warrant. According to Jenny Morrison, who worked at the insurance agency next door, Dad had tried to maintain his dignity as they led him away. But everyone in the building had seen it happen. The news traveled fast in a town the size of Crossville. By evening, David and I couldn't leave our house without someone asking about the situation. Some people were sympathetic, others were simply curious. But everyone wanted to know how Robert Mitchell, respected businessman, church deacon, pillar of the community, had ended up in jail. The next morning, I got a call from Mom. Her voice was barely recognizable, hoarse from crying and hollow with despair. How could you do this to your own father? How could he steal from his own daughter? I replied. Mom, this didn't have to happen. I gave him a chance to make this right. He's in jail, Sarah. Your father is sitting in a jail cell because of you. My father is sitting in a jail cell because he embezzled over $600,000 from my trust fund. I kept my voice calm, though my heart was racing. He made his choices. Now he has to live with the consequences. What about the family? What about our reputation in this town? The question revealed everything wrong with my family's priorities. Even now, facing criminal charges and financial ruin, Mom was worried about appearances rather than taking responsibility for what had happened. The family should have thought about that before spending years lying to me. We were trying to protect you. You were trying to protect yourselves. There's a difference. Mom hung up on me, but 20 minutes later, Rachel called. Sarah, I need to see you. There are things about Dad's situation that you don't know. What kinds of things? Things that might change how you want to handle this. Can I come over? An hour later, Rachel sat in our living room with a leather portfolio that I recognized as Dad's business ledger. She looked exhausted, but there was something different about her demeanor, a decisiveness that hadn't been there before. I went to see Dad in jail this morning, she began. He's broken, completely broken. He asked me to bring you this. She opened the portfolio to reveal pages of handwritten notes and Dad's careful script. It looked like a confession, but as I read through it. I realized it was something more complex, a desperate attempt to justify years of increasingly poor decisions. He wrote this last night in his cell, Rachel explained. It's his version of what happened and why. I read through Dad's account, which painted him as a victim of economic circumstances who'd been forced to make difficult choices to protect his family. According to his narrative, he'd always intended to repay the trust fund, and every withdrawal had been a temporary loan that would be repaid when his business recovered. This is garbage, I said, setting the ledger aside. He's trying to rewrite history to make himself look like a victim instead of a thief. I know. But Sarah, there's something else. Rachel pulled out a manila envelope. Dad also gave me this. He said it was his insurance policy. Inside the envelope were photocopies of bank statements, canceled checks, and financial documents that I didn't recognize. As I reviewed them, a disturbing pattern emerged. These are Mom's personal accounts, I said. Why does Dad have copies of Mom's bank records? Because Mom has been moving money too. Look at the dates. I examined the documents more carefully. Over the past 3 years, Mom had been systematically transferring money from her personal savings account to various other accounts, some in her name, some in Rachel's name, and some to accounts I didn't recognize. What is this? Mom has been hiding money, preparing for the possibility that Dad's business would fail and creditors would come after their assets. Rachel's voice was quiet. She's been planning an exit strategy. The betrayal felt like a physical blow. Not only had my parents stolen from me, but Mom had been preparing to abandon Dad if things got too bad. The woman who'd cried at his arrest, who'd accused me of destroying the family, had been secretly protecting herself while letting him face the consequences alone. How much money are we talking about? About $150,000. Money she transferred out of their joint accounts before creditors could freeze them. I stared at the bank statements, trying to process what I was seeing. Mom had been playing a longer game than any of us had realized, positioning herself to survive the financial collapse, while leaving Dad to face the legal consequences alone. Why are you showing me this? Because Dad thinks he can use it as leverage. He wants you to drop the criminal charges in exchange for him not exposing Mom's financial manipulation. The audacity was breathtaking. Even from jail, Dad was trying to manipulate the situation, using Mom's secrets as bargaining chips to escape accountability for his own crimes. What did you tell him? I told him I'd deliver his message, but I also told him I thought he was making a mistake. Rachel met my eyes directly. Sarah, I think you should prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law, even if it means prison time. Especially if it means prison time. Our family has been operating on lies and manipulation for so long that we don't know how to function any other way. Maybe prison is what it takes to break the cycle. I was surprised by Rachel's position, but as I thought about it, it made sense. She'd already paid a significant price for our family's dysfunction by leaving medical school. Now she wanted to see accountability carried through to its logical conclusion. What about Mom? Do you think she should face charges too? I think she should face consequences for her actions, yes. But I also think the hidden money could be part of your recovery. If she's been moving assets to avoid creditors, those assets might be recoverable for your trust fund. That afternoon, I met with Eleanor Whitfield to review the new evidence Rachel had provided. Eleanor's reaction was swift and decisive. This changes everything, she said, spreading Mom's bank statements across her desk. If your mother has been hiding assets while your father faces criminal charges, she's committed several crimes herself. What kinds of crimes? Fraudulent transfer of assets, obstruction of justice, potentially money laundering, depending on how she structured the transfers. Eleanor's eyes were bright with professional excitement. More importantly, this gives us significant leverage to recover additional funds. How? We can freeze all accounts associated with your mother, demand the return of any transferred assets, and threaten criminal prosecution if she doesn't cooperate fully. Eleanor pulled out her legal pad and began making notes. Your mother thought she was being clever, but she's actually made herself more vulnerable than your father. What's our next move? We file an emergency motion to freeze your mother's accounts and schedule a meeting with both your parents and their lawyers. They're going to have to choose between cooperation and complete financial and legal destruction. And if they refuse to cooperate, then your father goes to prison, your mother faces her own criminal charges, and we seize every asset we can find. Eleanor's smile was fierce. Sarah, your parents have been playing games with your inheritance for years. Now we're going to show them what happens when they play those games with someone who knows the rules. That evening, I called my parents. House one more time. Mom answered, her voice shaky and uncertain. Sarah, have you reconsidered about your father? Actually, Mom, I'm calling about you. The silence on the other end of the line was telling. I know about the hidden bank accounts. I know about the asset transfers. I know about your insurance policy against Dad's business failure. I don't know what you're talking about. Mom, I have copies of your bank statements. I know exactly what you've been doing. Her sharp intake of breath confirmed what I already knew. She'd been caught. You have 48 hours to return every penny you've hidden, or you'll be facing criminal charges right alongside Dad. Sarah, please, you don't understand. I understand that you've been lying to me about everything while positioning yourself to survive the financial collapse you knew was coming. My voice was steady, but I was shaking with anger. You made me feel guilty for prosecuting Dad while you were secretly protecting yourself. I was trying to save something for the family. You were trying to save something for yourself. There's a difference. I hung up before she could respond. The conversation had confirmed what I'd suspected. My parents had been playing a much deeper game than I realized, and they'd been willing to sacrifice me and my future to protect themselves. Ledger that Dad had sent from jail sat on our coffee table, a pathetic attempt to justify the unjustifiable, but it had also revealed the final layer of my family's deception, giving me the tools I needed to hold both my parents accountable for their actions. Are you okay? David asked, putting his arms around me. I'm angry, I said, and I'm tired of being lied to, but I'm also relieved. Now I know the whole truth. Now I know exactly what kind of people my parents really are. I rested my hand on my growing belly, and now I can make sure our child never has to learn these lessons the hard way. The business ledger would become evidence in Dad's criminal trial, but it would also serve as a reminder of the price of choosing dishonesty over integrity. My parents had spent years building a house of cards, and now they were discovering what happened when someone finally decided to stop pretending the foundation was solid. The meeting took place in Eleanor Whitfield's conference room on a gray Thursday morning. Mom arrived looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past week. Her hair was streaked with gray I'd never noticed before. Her usually perfect makeup was absent, and she clutched her wedding ring like a lifeline as she sat across from me and my attorney. Her lawyer, a nervous young man named Peterson, who clearly wished he was anywhere else, spread documents across the table with shaking hands. Mom's financial records painted the picture of a woman who'd been systematically preparing for disaster while publicly maintaining her loyalty to her husband. Mrs. Mitchell, Eleanor began, her voice professionally neutral. We're here because you've been moving substantial assets while your husband faces criminal charges for embezzling your daughter's trust fund. This puts you in a very precarious legal position. Mom's voice was barely above a whisper. I was trying to protect the family. Protect the family from what? From losing everything? Robert's business has been failing for years. I knew it was only a matter of time before creditors started seizing our assets. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I thought if I could save something, anything, we might be able to rebuild. Eleanor slid a bank statement across the table. Mrs. Mitchell, you transferred $47,000 to an account in the Cayman Islands. That's not protecting family assets, that's money laundering. The accusation hit Mom like a physical blow. I didn't know. The financial advisor said it was just an offshore savings account. Which financial advisor? Mom gave them a name I didn't recognize, someone from Nashville who specialized in asset protection strategies. As Eleanor took notes, I realized that Mom's financial maneuvering had been more sophisticated than I'd imagined. What other accounts are there? I asked directly. Mom single quotes as Lawyer tried to intervene. My client doesn't have to. Actually, she does, Eleanor interrupted. We have court orders freezing all known accounts, but if there are others we haven't discovered, your client is facing additional charges of obstruction of justice. The threat worked. Over the next hour, Mom revealed a network of accounts and investments that she'd been building over the past 3 years. Money market accounts in different banks, a small investment portfolio managed by the Nashville advisor, and several certificates of deposit in Rachel's name. How much total? Eleanor asked when the inventory was complete. Mom's lawyer consulted his notes. Approximately $187,000. The number was staggering. While I'd been struggling to pay bills and David had been working overtime to afford legal fees, Mom had been sitting on nearly $200,000 that she'd hidden from everyone, including Dad. Where did this money come from originally? I asked. Some of it was from my personal savings account. Some was from the joint household account before I closed it, and some... She stopped, unable to meet my eyes. Somewhat, Mom? Some of it was from the trust fund. Robert would transfer money to our joint account, and I would move portions of it to my personal accounts before he could spend it all. The admission was like a confession of guilt. Mom hadn't just known about the theft, she'd been an active participant, skimming money from my stolen inheritance to build her own secret nest egg. So you were stealing from me too, I said. I was trying to preserve something for the family's future. Whose family? Because you certainly weren't thinking about me or my baby. Mom started crying then, not the delicate tears of a Southern lady, but the harsh sobs of someone whose careful plans had completely fallen apart. Sarah, I know how this looks, but I never meant to hurt you. But you did hurt me. For 3 years, you knew Dad was stealing from me, and instead of stopping him or telling me the truth, you helped him steal more efficiently. Eleanor pulled out a legal document. Mrs. Mitchell, we're prepared to offer you a choice. You can voluntarily return all the hidden assets to satisfy part of your daughter's claim, and we'll recommend that criminal charges against you be dropped. Or you can fight us and face prosecution for money laundering, fraudulent asset transfer, and conspiracy to commit embezzlement. Mom looked at her lawyer, who nodded grimly. Mrs. Mitchell, I have to advise you that the evidence against you is substantial. Your best option is to cooperate fully. What about Robert? Mom asked, what happens to him if I cooperate? Your husband faces criminal charges regardless of what you decide, Eleanor said firmly. His fate isn't dependent on your cooperation. But if I give up the money, he'll have nothing when he gets out of prison. The statement revealed everything wrong with Mom's priorities. Even now, facing her own legal jeopardy, she was more worried about Dad's comfort than about the daughter she'd helped rob. Mom, I said, leaning forward across the table, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Dad is going to prison because he chose to steal from me for 8 years. You're facing charges because you chose to help him and then lie about it. These are consequences of your choices, not punishments I'm inflicting on you. But we're family. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't lie for years about something this important. Family doesn't reject an unborn grandchild because acknowledging them threatens their financial schemes. I touched my belly, feeling the baby move in response to my stress. You and Dad stopped being my family the moment you decided your comfort was more important than my future. Mom pulled off her wedding ring and set it on the table, a gesture that seemed both symbolic and desperate. 43 years of marriage, she whispered. 43 years, and it's ending like this. It's ending like this because of choices you and Dad made, I said. Not because of anything I did. Eleanor gave Mom and her lawyer 30 minutes to discuss their options privately. When they returned, Mom's decision was written on her face defeat mixed with resignation. I'll return the money, she said quietly. All of it. And you'll testify truthfully about your husband's management of the trust fund? Yes. And you'll cooperate fully with our investigation into any other hidden assets or financial irregularities? Yes. Eleanor made notes on her legal pad. In exchange, we'll recommend to the district attorney that criminal charges against you be dropped in favor of civil restitution. As the lawyers worked out the details of Mom's cooperation agreement, I studied my mother's face. The woman who'd raised me, who'd taught me to bake cookies and tie my shoes, who'd comforted me through childhood disappointments, had become a stranger. Her willingness to participate in stealing from me, to hide assets while Dad faced criminal charges, to prioritize her own security over honesty, it all revealed a person I'd never really known. Sarah, Mom said as we prepared to leave, I know you'll probably never forgive me, but I want you to know that I am happy about the baby. Are you? Because your actions suggest that my baby was nothing more than an inconvenience that threatened your financial security. That's not true. The baby just complicated things. The baby complicated your scheme to steal from me. There's a difference. Mom's lawyer gathered his documents and prepared to escort her out. Before leaving, she turned back to me one final time. What's going to happen to me now? Where am I supposed to live? How am I supposed to survive? The questions revealed the depth of her dependence on the stolen money and her complete inability to take responsibility for her situation. She was asking me to solve problems that she'd created through years of dishonest choices. I don't know, Mom. I guess you'll have to figure out how to support yourself honestly for the first time in years. Sarah, please. Please what? Please pretend this never happened. Please let you keep some of the money you helped steal from me. Please prioritize your comfort over justice. I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the whole conversation. I'm done sacrificing my well-being for yours. After Mom left, Eleanor and I sat in a quiet conference room, surrounded by evidence of my family's financial crimes. The cooperation agreement would return nearly $200,000 to me, a significant portion of what had been stolen, but it wouldn't repair the relationships that had been destroyed. How do you feel? Eleanor asked, relieved, angry, sad. I thought about it for a moment. Mostly, I feel free. For the first time in my life, I don't have to pretend that my family's dysfunction is normal. Your mother made the right choice, legally speaking. This cooperation agreement will probably keep her out of prison, but it won't keep her out of bankruptcy court, and it won't restore her marriage. I picked up Mom's wedding ring, which she'd forgotten on the table. She chose to save herself instead of her husband. I guess we finally know what her priorities really are. As I drove home that afternoon, I carried Mom's wedding ring in my purse, symbol of the marriage and family that had been destroyed by years of lies and financial manipulation. The ring represented 43 years of what I thought was love and partnership, but which had actually been built on a foundation of deception and mutual enabling. That evening, I placed the ring in a small box in my jewelry drawer next to the pregnancy test that had started this whole chain of events. Two artifacts of the same story, one representing hope and new life, the other representing the death of everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. My baby would grow up hearing this story, learning about the importance of honesty, integrity, and standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. They would never have to wonder if their family's love was conditional on their willingness to keep secrets or tolerate abuse. The wedding ring would serve as a reminder that some relationships aren't worth preserving if they require sacrificing your principles to maintain them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone else's destructive choices, even if that person is your mother. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Mom's cooperation agreement had been finalized. I recognized Rachel's handwriting immediately, the same careful script she'd used for her medical school applications, now employed for a very different kind of formal document. Inside the envelope was Rachel's formal resignation letter from medical school. But it wasn't the draft she'd shown me weeks earlier. This was the final version, submitted and accepted, with the medical school's response attached. The dean had written a personal note expressing regret at losing such a promising student and leaving the door open for her to reapply in the future under different circumstances. But what surprised me was the second document in the envelope, a job application for the Crossville Elementary School District, filled out in Rachel's neat handwriting. At the bottom, she'd written a personal note. Teaching application submitted today. Starting salary $28,000. It's honest work, and it's a beginning. I called her immediately. You actually did it, I said when she answered. You really quit medical school. I submitted my withdrawal letter yesterday. It's official. Her voice was different, tired, but somehow lighter than it had been in months. I cleaned out my apartment this weekend and moved back home. Well, temporarily back home until I can afford my own place. How are Mom and Dad handling it? Rachel laughed, but there was no humor in it. Dad's in jail, and Mom's not speaking to anyone. She blames both of us for destroying the family. Both of us? You for prosecuting Dad, me for giving up on medical school. According to Mom, we're both being selfish and dramatic. I thought about Mom's cooperation agreement, about the nearly $200,000 she'd agreed to return. Her criticism of Rachel and me for being selfish while she'd been hiding stolen money was breathtaking in its hypocrisy. What about the teaching job? I interview next week. The principal knows about the family situation. Word travels fast. In a town this size, but she says if I'm qualified and committed, they'll consider me for a position next fall. And if you don't get it, then I'll find something else. Retail, food service, whatever it takes to support myself while I figure out my next steps. Rachel's voice was resolute. Sarah, I've spent 4 years living off your money, and before that, I spent my whole life living off the family's expectations. It's time I learned what it's like to stand on my own. The change in my sister was remarkable. The golden child who'd always had her path laid out for her was now facing the same uncertainties that most people dealt with every day. But instead of being bitter about it, she seemed almost relieved. I have something else to tell you, Rachel continued. I've been meeting with a financial counselor about setting up a payment plan for what I owe you. I know we talked about a partial repayment, but I want to pay back everything. Rachel, that's going to take years at a teacher's salary. Then it takes years. I need to do this, Sarah. I need to know that I've made it right. 3 days later, Rachel came to my house with a folder full of documents. She'd worked out a detailed repayment plan with a credit counselor, calculated down to the monthly payment amount based on her projected teaching salary. 37 months, she said, showing me the payment schedule. If I live very modestly and put every extra penny toward this debt, I can pay you back completely in just over 3 years. I looked at the numbers. Rachel had calculated her minimal living expenses, rent for a tiny apartment, basic groceries, bus fare, essential clothing, and dedicated everything else to repaying me. It was a Spartan existence that would require real sacrifice. This is too aggressive, I said. You need to have some money for emergencies, for small pleasures. This plan doesn't leave you anything to live on. I don't need much to live on. I need to pay you back more than I need to be comfortable. But what if you get sick? What if your car breaks down? What if you meet something you haven't budgeted for? Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then I'll figure it out. Sarah, I've been comfortable my whole life, and it made me complacent. Maybe I need to be uncomfortable for a while. I studied my sister's face, looking for signs of martyrdom or self-pity, but all I saw was determination. The golden child who'd never faced real consequences was finally ready to accept full responsibility for her choices. I have a better idea, I said. What if we set up a more reasonable payment plan and you use the extra money to go back to school part-time? Go back to school for what? Education. If you want to be a teacher, get your teaching degree properly. Take night classes while you work during the day. Rachel looked confused. But that would delay paying you back even longer. Rachel, I'm not trying to punish you for the rest of your life. I want you to learn from this and become the person you should have been all along. I pulled out a calculator and started running numbers. If you pay me back over 5 years instead of 3, you can afford to take education classes and still live like a human being. Why would you do that for me? Because great-grandmother Eleanor's letter talked about making choices based on love rather than fear. I'm choosing to believe that you've learned from this experience and that you genuinely want to make things right. Rachel stared at the revised payment plan I'd sketched out. This is more than I deserve. Maybe, but it's what's practical, and it's what gives you the best chance of building a real life instead of just serving penance. Over the next hour, we worked out a plan that balanced accountability with realistic expectations. Rachel would pay me $400 a month for 5 years, covering the principal amount she owed plus modest interest. The reduced payment would allow her to take education classes at the community college and eventually transfer to a 4-year program to complete her teaching degree. There's one condition, I said as we finalized the agreement. What's that? You pay for your education yourself this time? No family money, no shortcuts, no special treatment. You work your way through school like everyone else. I wouldn't have it any other way. As Rachel prepared to leave, she pulled out one final document, her ethics complaint to the medical school, formally admitting that her education had been funded through embezzled funds and requesting that her academic record reflect this fact. You don't have to submit this, I said, reading through the complaint. It could affect your ability to apply to medical school again in the future. I want to submit it. I need there to be a record of what happened, so I can never pretend it didn't occur. Rachel's voice was firm. If I ever want to go back to medical school, I want to do it with a clean slate, with everyone knowing exactly who I am and what I've done. The ethics complaint was the final piece of Rachel's self-imposed accountability. She wasn't just leaving medical school, she was burning the bridges that would allow her to return without facing the consequences of her actions. Are you sure about this? Once you submit this complaint, there's no going back. I'm sure. Sarah, I've spent my whole life taking shortcuts and accepting advantages I didn't earn. It's time I learned what it means to do things the right way, even when it's harder. 2 weeks later, Rachel got the teaching job. The principal had been impressed by her honesty about her family situation and her commitment to starting over in education. She would be teaching 4th grade at the elementary school where I'd once dreamed of working, earning a modest salary that would barely cover her expenses and debt payments. I attended Rachel's first parent-teacher night, curious to see how she'd adapted to her new role. The classroom was decorated with student artwork and inspirational posters about honesty, kindness, and hard work. Rachel introduced herself to parents as someone who believed in second chances and the importance of learning from mistakes. Ms. Mitchell really cares about our kids, one parent told me afterward. She's tough but fair, and she doesn't let them make excuses for their behavior. After the parents left, Rachel and I sat in her empty classroom, surrounded by the evidence of her new life. The contrast with her medical school environment was stark. Instead of expensive equipment and cutting-edge research, she was working with construction paper, glue sticks, and donated supplies. Do you miss it? I asked. Medical school, the prestige, the future you were planning? Rachel considered the question carefully. I miss the intellectual challenge sometimes, but I don't miss the pressure, the competition, or the feeling that I was always one mistake away from disappointing everyone. And this, teaching fourth graders, this feels honest. These kids don't care that I used to be the golden child or that my family has money problems. They just want someone who shows up every day and cares about their education. She smiled, and for the first time in years, it looked genuine. I'm good at this, Sarah, not because someone else paid for my training or because I was living up to family expectations, but because I actually enjoy working with kids. The resignation letter that had started Rachel's transformation was now framed on her apartment wall, not as a badge of shame, but as a reminder of the moment she'd chosen: integrity over convenience. Next to it hung her first teaching contract and a photo of her fourth grade class. I have something for you, Rachel said, pulling a small envelope from her desk drawer. Inside was her first payment check, $400 made out to me, with trust fund repayment 1 of 60 written in the memo line. But attached to it was a note that made me tear up. Sarah, this is the first money I've ever earned that I can be truly proud of. It's not much, but it represents something important, the beginning of paying back what I owe you and the start of building a life based on my own efforts rather than someone else's money. Thank you for believing that I could change and for giving me the chance to prove it. I know I can never undo the damage I participated in, but I hope I can show you through my actions that I've learned from this experience. I'm proud to be your sister, and I'm grateful for the example you've set about standing up for what's right. Even when it's difficult. Love, Rachel P.S. The kids ask about you all the time. They think it's cool that their teacher's sister is having a baby. I tell them that you're the strongest person I know. As I drove home that evening, I carried Rachel's first payment check in my purse. It represented more than just money. It represented my sister's commitment to rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect rather than family, obligation, and shared secrets. The golden child who'd never face real consequences had transformed into someone who was learning the value of honest work and personal accountability. It wasn't the life any of us had planned for Rachel, but it was a life she could be proud of, and that made all the difference. When I got home, I showed David the check and Rachel's note. She's really doing it, I said. She's really changing her whole life to make this right. How does that make you feel? Hopeful. For the first time since this whole thing started, I feel like maybe our family can actually heal from this. I tucked the check into the folder where I was keeping all the legal documents from our case. Not the same family we were before, but maybe a better one based on honesty instead of lies. Rachel's teaching contract would become another artifact in our family's story, proof that people could change when they were willing to face the consequences of their actions. Her resignation letter had marked the end of the golden child era, but her teaching contract marked the beginning of something better: relationship between sisters who finally understood what it meant to treat each other with respect and honesty. The check from the court-ordered asset recovery arrived on a crisp December morning, just 2 weeks before my due date. Eleanor Whitfield had called the day before to prepare me, but seeing the actual amount, $287,000, written on the bank draft still took my breath away. This represents the recovery from your mother's hidden accounts, the sale of the commercial property your father purchased with trust funds, and a portion of the business assets, Eleanor explained as I sat in her office, the check heavy in my hands. It's not the full amount that was stolen, but it's substantial. I stared at the numbers, trying to process what this meant for David, the baby, and me. Nearly $300,000, enough to buy a house, secure our child's education, and provide the financial stability I'd never had growing up. What about the rest? The money that's still missing? Your father will be ordered to pay restitution as part of his sentence, but realistically, He'll probably never be able to pay back the full amount. His business is bankrupt, and his earning potential will be severely limited by his criminal record. Dad's sentencing hearing had been the previous month. He'd been convicted on 3 felony counts and sentenced to 4 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 2 years if he demonstrated good behavior and participated in financial responsibility counseling. The man who'd been a pillar of our community was now inmate, hash 47,582 at the state correctional facility. Any regrets about pursuing the criminal charges? Eleanor asked, watching my face carefully. None, I said firmly. He made his choices, and now he's facing the consequences. I'm not responsible for protecting him from the results of his own actions. The recovery money represented more than just financial restitution. It represented the possibility of building the life David and I had always dreamed of. We could buy a home with a yard for the baby, start college funds, maybe even help David expand his construction business further. That afternoon, David and I sat at our kitchen table with the bank draft between us, discussing our options. It felt surreal to be planning for financial security after months of legal battles and uncertainty. First thing we do is buy a house, David said, his excitement barely contained. Something with a big backyard, good schools, maybe room for a workshop. And we put money aside for the baby's education, I added. College fund, maybe money for trade school or whatever they want to pursue. What about your teaching dream? With this money, you could go back to school yourself. I'd been thinking about that possibility for weeks. The recovered funds would allow me to pursue the education degree I'd always wanted, to finally become the teacher I dreamed of being before family financial constraints had made it seem impossible. I think I'd like that. Not right away. I want to spend the first few years home with the baby, but eventually, yes. I think I'd like to go back to school. We spent the evening making lists and dreaming about possibilities. For the first time in months, we weren't talking about legal strategies or stolen money. We were talking about our future, our family, and the life we wanted to build together. The next morning, I deposited the check into a new bank account that I'd opened specifically for the recovered funds. Eleanor had recommended keeping the money separate from our regular accounts, both for tax purposes and to maintain clear records of the recovery dot. As I watched the teller process the deposit, I thought about great-grandmother Eleanor and the legacy she'd tried to leave me. Her original trust fund had been violated and stolen, but her deeper gift, the knowledge that I deserved security and independence, had survived. The money in this new account represented her love and my own determination to fight for what was rightfully mine. The new bank statements would become the artifacts of our recovery, proof that sometimes justice prevailed and that people who stood up for themselves could win against overwhelming odds. That weekend, David and I went house hunting for the first time. After years of renting and scraping by, we could actually afford to buy something substantial, not a mansion, but a real home with room to grow. The house we fell in love with was a modest 3-bedroom ranch on the outskirts of town, with a large yard and a detached garage that David could convert into a workshop. It needed some cosmetic work, but the bones were solid, and David was excited about the renovation possibilities. We could put a swing set there, I said, pointing to a level area under the oak trees in the backyard, and maybe a vegetable garden along the fence. And I could build a deck off the back of the house, somewhere for the baby to play safely while we're outside. The real estate agent smiled as she watched us plan our future in the empty rooms. You two seem perfect for this house. When would you like to make an offer? 2 weeks later, we signed the purchase agreement. The closing was scheduled for after the baby was born, giving us time to prepare for both major life changes simultaneously. As my due date approached, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened since that devastating Sunday dinner. The pregnancy that had triggered my family's rejection had also revealed their true nature. and given me the motivation to fight for what was mine. The baby's nursery was ready, painted a soft yellow with white furniture that David had built himself. The crib, changing table, and rocking chair were all crafted with love and anticipation, representing the honest work and genuine care that our child would grow up surrounded by. On my last day of work before maternity leave, my coworkers threw me a small baby shower. The gifts were modest but heartfelt blankets, baby clothes, books, and toys that represented their genuine excitement for our growing family. "You've been through so much this year," my supervisor said as we shared cake in the break room. "But look how strong you've become. That baby is lucky to have you as a mother." As I cleaned out my desk, I found the original pregnancy test tucked away in my drawer, the same test that had started this whole journey. I wrapped it carefully and put it in the baby's memory box, along with great-grandmother Eleanor's letter and copies of the legal documents that had restored my inheritance. These artifacts would tell our child the story of how they came to be born into a family that valued honesty, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what's right. They would know that their mother had fought for their future before they were even born, ensuring that they would grow up with both financial security and moral clarity. That evening, David and I sat in the rocking chair he'd built, my hands resting on my full belly as we felt the baby move restlessly inside me. "Do you think we'll tell them everything?" David asked. "About your family, about what happened with the trust fund?" "When they're old enough to understand, yes. I want them to know the whole story, not to hurt them, but to teach them about the importance of honesty and standing up for yourself." "And what about your parents? What if they want a relationship with the baby?" I'd been thinking about that question for months. Dad would be in prison for at least 2 years, and Mom was facing her own financial and legal challenges. Even after Dad's release, I couldn't imagine welcoming them back into our lives without substantial changes in their behavior and attitudes. I think they forfeited their right to be grandparents when they chose to steal from their grandchild's future. I said, finally, if they want a relationship with this baby, they're going to have to prove that they've genuinely changed, not just that they're sorry they got caught. That seems fair. As we sat together in the quiet evening, I felt the deep satisfaction of knowing that I'd fought for what was right and won. The money recovered from my family's theft would provide security for our child, but more importantly, the experience had taught me that I was strong enough to stand up to anyone, even family, when it came to protecting what mattered most. New bank account statements, sitting on our kitchen counter, represented more than just financial recovery. They represented the foundation of a new kind of family, one built on honesty, respect, and genuine love rather than manipulation and conditional acceptance. Our baby would be born into a world where truth mattered more than appearances, where justice was worth fighting for, and where family meant people who supported your dreams rather than stealing from them. It wasn't the family I'd grown up in, but it was the family I was determined to create. Emma Grace Sullivan was born on December 18th at 3:42 a.m., weighing 7 pounds and 4 ounces. She had David's dark hair and my stubborn chin, and when she opened her eyes for the first time, I felt like I was seeing the future, not just her. Future, but the future of our entire family. The first ultrasound photo I'd treasured for months was now replaced by the real thing, a perfect, healthy baby who had no idea that her birth had been the catalyst for exposing years of family lies and financial betrayal. To Emma, the world was simple. She was loved, she was safe, and she was wanted. Carol and Jim Sullivan were the first visitors, arriving at the hospital with flowers, balloons, and tears of joy. They held Emma with the reverence of people who understood what a miracle looked like, and I watched David's face light up as his father cradled his granddaughter for the first time. "She's perfect," Carol whispered, stroking Emma's tiny hand. "Absolutely perfect." "She's going to be spoiled rotten," Jim added with a grin. "I've already started building her a playground for the new house." Rachel arrived that afternoon carrying a gift bag filled with books, not expensive toys or fancy clothes, but picture books about strong girls and families that love each other. She held Emma carefully, as if she was holding something precious and fragile. "Hi, baby girl," she whispered. "I'm your Aunt Rachel. I made some mistakes before you were born, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know how much you're loved." Emma slept peacefully in Rachel's arms, oblivious to the weight of her aunt's words. But I understood what Rachel was promising, that Emma would grow up with an aunt who had learned the value of honesty and integrity, who would be a positive influence rather than a cautionary tale. "Any word from Mom and Dad?" Rachel asked quietly. "Dad's in prison and Mom ... I shrugged. "Mom hasn't called. I think she's too ashamed to face what she's done. Maybe that's for the best, at least for now. Maybe it is." David's business partner from Nashville sent flowers and a card congratulating us on Emma's birth and the recent expansion of Sullivan Construction. The business had thrived since Jim's investment, landing several major contracts and earning a reputation for quality, work, and fair dealing. Emma would grow up watching her father build things with his hands, creating value through honest labor rather than taking shortcuts or exploiting others. Eleanor Whitfield stopped by the next day with legal documents that needed my signature. Final paperwork related to the asset recovery and Dad's criminal case. She also brought a small gift, a silver picture frame with great-grandmother Eleanor's photo inside. "I thought your daughter should know about her great-great-grandmother," Eleanor said. "The woman who believed in providing for family without strings attached." I placed the frame on the bedside table where Emma could see it. "What's the final status on everything?" "Your father's restitution payments will begin when he's released from prison, probably in about 2 years. Your mother has complied fully with the asset recovery order and isn't facing criminal charges. The civil cases are essentially closed." "And the money?" "After legal fees and court costs, you've recovered approximately $280,000, not the full amount. That was stolen, but enough to provide real security for your family." Emma stirred in her sleep, making the small sounds that would soon become familiar music in our household. I touched her tiny hand and thought about the legacy she was inheriting, not just the recovered money, but the knowledge that her mother had fought for what was right. "There's one more thing," Eleanor said, pulling out a final document. "Your great-grandmother's will included a provision that if her trust was ever compromised, the family could establish a new trust for future generations. I've drafted the paperwork to create the Emma Grace Sullivan Trust, funded with the recovered assets." The new trust document was everything the original should have been: clear terms, independent oversight, and ironclad protections against misuse. Emma would have access to the funds for education when she turned 18, with the remainder available when she turned 25 or had children of her own, whichever came first. "This time," Eleanor said, "the trustee will be a bank, not a family member. No one will be able to steal from Emma the way they stole from you." That evening, as visiting hours ended and David and I were alone with our daughter, we sat together. In the hospital bed, Emma sleeping peacefully between us. The ultrasound photo that had started our journey was now tucked into her baby book, along with her hospital bracelet, first photo, and footprints. "What do you think she'd be like?" David asked, gently stroking Emma's hair. "Strong," I said without hesitation. "She'd be strong and honest and brave. She know that she's loved unconditionally, and she'll never have to question whether her family's support depends on her willingness to keep secrets or tolerate abuse. And when she's old enough to ask about your parents, I'll tell her the truth, that sometimes people make bad choices, even people who are supposed to love and protect you. But I'll also tell her that you don't have to accept those choices or let them define your life." David nodded, understanding the weight of what we were promising our daughter. Emma would grow up in a family that valued honesty above appearances integrity above convenience, and justice above keeping the peace. The next morning, we took Emma home to our new house, the one we'd bought with the recovered trust fund money, the one with the big yard and room to grow. David had finished the nursery the week before, complete with a rocking chair where I would nurse Emma and tell her stories about her great-great-grandmother who had believed in providing for family with love rather than conditions. As we pulled into our driveway, I noticed a small package on the front porch. Inside was a hand-knitted baby blanket and a note written in Mom's careful script for Emma Grace. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, and I know I may never have the privilege of being part of your life. But I want you to know that you are loved, even by a grandmother who made terrible mistakes before you were born. I hope your mother will tell you about your great-great-grandmother, Eleanor, who is a remarkable woman. You carry her name and her strength, and I believe you will grow up to be everything she hoped her legacy would produce. With love and regret, Grandmother Patricia. I held the blanket for a long moment, feeling its softness and the care that had gone into every stitch. It was beautiful work, the kind of gift that came from genuine love rather than obligation, but it also represented everything complicated about family relationships. The capacity for love and cruelty to exist in the same person, the difficulty of separating good intentions from harmful actions. What do you want to do with it? David asked. Keep it, I said finally. Someday, when Emma is old enough to understand complicated things, I'll tell her about the grandmother who loved her but wasn't able to be part of her life because of choices she made. The blanket can be part of that story. That night, we put Emma to sleep in her crib for the first time, surrounded by the symbols of our new life, David's handcrafted furniture, the trust fund documents that would secure her future, Rachel's, books about strong girls and honest families, and Mom's blanket that represented both love and loss. As I stood in the doorway watching Emma sleep, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. The pregnancy announcement that was supposed to bring my family together had instead revealed their true nature and given me the courage to fight for something better. Emma would grow up knowing that she was planned, wanted, and fought for before she was even born. She would know that her parents had chosen each other based on love and respect rather than convenience or family approval. She would know that integrity mattered more than appearances and that standing up for what's right was worth any cost. The ultrasound photo in her baby book would always remind me of the hope and joy I'd felt when I first learned about her existence. But more importantly, it would remind her that she had been celebrated from the very beginning, not because of what she might achieve or how she might reflect on the family, but simply because she was herself. In the quiet darkness of our new home, with Emma sleeping peacefully and David's arm around my shoulders, I felt the deep satisfaction of knowing that we had built something real and lasting. Not the perfect family I'd once imagined, but an honest family based on genuine love and mutual respect. Emma Grace Sullivan would grow up secure in the knowledge that she was wanted, protected, and valued for exactly who she was. And that, I realized, was the greatest inheritance any parent could provide. The confidence to face the world with integrity and the strength to demand the love and respect she deserved. The baby who wasn't welcome in my father's house had become the foundation of something beautiful and new. Her story would begin where mine had found its strength, with the understanding that family meant people who supported your dreams rather than stealing from them, and that love meant accepting someone completely rather than placing conditions on your care. As I kissed Emma's forehead and whispered promises about the future we would build together, I felt the profound peace that comes from knowing you fought the right fight and won. She would never have to wonder if she was worthy of love because she would grow up surrounded by people who had proven their devotion through their actions rather than just their words. And that, I thought as I drifted off to sleep, was exactly the welcome every child deserved.